Welcome everyone to our board meeting in public. Welcome to my team, my board colleagues around the table. Also welcome to the members of the public that we have sitting with us in the room, and welcome to anyone who is watching on our live stream today. I just wanted to give a particular mention to people who have joined our board since our last board meeting. So Liz Bromley is one of our new non-exec directors. Welcome, Liz. We have Matt Graham, who is our acting coup at the moment, our Chief Operating Officer. We've got Jill Hunt, who, although has sat around the board table in the past, was in an interim role at the time and is now our permanent Chief Nursing Officer. So welcome in that capacity, Jill. And Hayley Wardle as well, who's our new Chief Finance Officer. Just started this week, so Hayley's going to be doing a bit of a double act with Rob Clark, who's sitting next to her. Rob has been doing a fantastic job in the interim role, having arrived with us as the Finance Improvement Director, and will be going back to that role. So thank you for all your efforts in that interim capacity, Rob. Could I remind you all, when you're speaking, if it's possible to just announce who you are for the benefit of those watching on screen. It would really help to know your name and your position in the organisation. Apologies for absence. We've got David Jackson and Kelly Angus. Any others that we're aware? I think we've got everyone else around the table. The usual declarations of interest in relation to anything on the agenda today. Go on to the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 25th of March. The minutes are in the papers. Has anyone got any comments on the minutes themselves? Any alterations to make? No, we happy to approve those minutes? Great. Going on to the action log. We only have 2 actions on there, both for Shafi, and I think Shafi will be coming on to that in relation to your report later on the agenda. So I suggest that we close these 2 down for the moment. There may be some actions arising out of Shafi's report in due course, but I think they'll come through as separate actions arising from this meeting, if we're all happy with that. There are some actions that were closed last time. Are we happy that they were properly closed and remain closed? And then there's some future actions for execs to pick up in due course. Great, thank you. Moving on, we always like to start our board meetings with a patient focus, if we can. And I'm very pleased to say that we have Emma Robertson with us today, one of our patient safety partners. Emma's been doing a fantastic job to bring a patient voice to our organisation. So thank you for what you've been doing across the piece, as it were, Emma. But if you could today just concentrate on what you've been doing in relation to helping our deaf patients and our people who visit our various facilities and struggle on that basis, and the work you've been doing to try and help them. Thank you.
Thank you. So as just explained there, I'm here this morning to talk about the barriers that deaf patients are experiencing across our hospitals. My name is Emma Robertson, and as explained, I'm the Patient Safety and Experience Partner for County Durham and Darlington NHS Trust. For those of you who don't know what that means, it means that I'm here to represent the patient. I'm here to put the patient's thoughts and their voice into conversations and situations when they wouldn't normally be there, which is what I've been doing. Like I said, today I'm focusing on the work that I've been doing around the barriers that deaf patients are facing. This work, just to give you a little bit of background into how this came about, this work started really in November 2025 when I was looking at our website, our trust website, and I was writing a page on reasonable adjustments. And I wrote an entire page. And as I got to the bottom of it, I was almost shaking my head at myself because I was writing a page in text. And actually text is only accessible by a certain amount of people. And I sat there and I thought, how can we talk about reasonable adjustments in a text form? We should have at least a BSL video on here. We should have a voiceover. We should have subtitles. Our website does have functionality to add some of those things, but not everything. And it kind of opened a can of worms, shall we say. I kind of started off down a route, which is what I'm going to talk about today. Before we go into the work that I've been doing, I just want to run through a couple of things. I think everybody's had a copy of the presentation shared. Throughout the presentation, you'll see the term deaf, but with two Ds, a big D and a little d. Those Ds stand for the kind of where the deaf person's deafness comes from, should we say. So the big D represents a person that was born deaf and very much a part of the deaf community. The small d is a person that's acquired hearing loss or deafness throughout their life. Sometimes people see that and wonder what that means, and I use that term throughout the presentation. Another thing to note is that, like I've just said, English spoken language or written language is not a deaf BSL user's first language. So when we think about a deaf person and we see them communicating in BSL, to present them with a letter or a form, they can't read it, they can't understand it, it's not their first language, and it's really important that we recognise that. Another point, in 2022, the British Sign Language Act was brought in, and that recognised that BSL is a language, is a recognised language for us here in England, Scotland and Wales. And finally, my final point, then I'll go on to the work. The Accessible Information Standard deems that all NHS services need to make sure that their information is accessible to all patients. And with deaf patients, that means we need to provide BSL interpreters or an alternative form of communication. Not all deaf people use BSL interpreters. The majority do and use BSL to communicate, but that's what that means. So moving on to what I've been doing. So in December, there was already a complaint in the system that I was aware of, and there was already people that were involved with that, a couple of people that were involved with that. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to form a positive way in which we could use our feedback from our patients in order to make a difference, and not just talk to one another, so not just talk to colleagues, which we do a lot. I wanted to talk to external people, I wanted to talk to more patients, I wanted to talk to different organisations. So I set up a new working group. I defined some clear terms of reference, which meant that there was people from the community partnership organisations involved. That includes deaf charities, the local authority, the ICB, Health Watch and other organisations. And what we did is we created a proactive positive space for people to share feedback, and that's been working really, really well. On the back of that, what we found is that wasn't, because of the communication barriers that deaf people have, that wasn't the place to bring deaf people in to kind of share their experiences. We needed to be in front of them. We needed to be sat down in front of them with interpreters. So with the help of a charity called Action Deafness, I organised a public engagement event in April. And we went out to a community hub in Durham, and we arranged a coffee morning, and around 15 to 20 deaf people came along, took an army of staff with me and interpreters with me, and we split the group into two. It was really important to me that we had note takers there so that we could document, so that we could come away and actually reflect on what we'd been told by our deaf patients. So we did all of that. And again, it was about creating a safe, positive space for these people to share. Deaf people don't complain generally. They don't have the means to do it. They don't have the confidence to do it. So we gave them not a place to complain, but a place to talk. And that's what we did. We did a lot of talking and a lot of listening as well, and reassurance. So on the back of that and the information that was discussed, I just want to talk you through a little bit of what's happening right now in the hospital. I'm going to focus initially on one lady, which is a lady called Noreen, who is 83. Noreen's complaint came into our trust in January, and I've been lucky that, via an advocate I should add, because she didn't have the means to put the complaint in herself. There isn't a way for her to do that currently. So via an advocate, her complaint came in, which is what I'm going to talk through. But I've been fortunate that her advocate has been actively involved in all of the work that we've been doing. So she came along to the working group and she was involved in the engagement event as well, which has been great. But Noreen is 83. She's profoundly deaf and BSL is her first language. Like I mentioned, her complaint came in January. Noreen is the sole carer for her husband, who's also in his 80s and profoundly deaf, and also her 91-year-old sister. All of them have medical needs. Previously, they were managed at their local surgery, but they've been moved here to Darlington Memorial Hospital, which has made the coordination of those appointments far trickier for her. When we confirm an appointment to a deaf person, we send them a letter and we tell them that we've booked an interpreter. We then ask them to ring us if there's anything wrong with that appointment. Now, Noreen can't ring us to say that there's a problem, or even sometimes she was receiving letters without interpreters, so she knows because she's been doing this a long time that it should say there's an interpreter booked, and quite often she would get a letter and it wouldn't, so she would know there's a problem, but she couldn't ring us. So Noreen started to walk to the hospital on her day of her appointments to check whether an interpreter had been booked. Now, I did the math a few weeks ago, and she lives it's a 3-mile round trip. So on the day of her appointment, she's doing a 3-mile round trip before the appointment to check if an interpreter had been booked. So that's about Noreen. But positive, it's not all negative, positive. On the back of that, there was a simple fix for this, and that was just get a phone. Let's have a phone and let's give her the communication means that she needs. So we've done that. We've listened. We have got a trust phone, and the bookings team have now got that. And Noreen, today, a letter is going out to her today. And it hasn't just happened for today. This has been something that's been an ongoing thing, and it's all coming together. But Noreen and other deaf patients will have a number now that they can text. They can text to check that their interpreter has been booked, and they can text to check details, and that letter that I mentioned before, we will now include that number in that letter, and we will say, text us or WhatsApp us. I'm not sure which way around we're going to do it, but that was a really simple solution. She knew it, she suggested it to us, that we've done for her. So that's Noreen. Just moving on to some other experiences that I've heard about, and this is all going to sound a bit shocking, but there is lots of positive work going on, which I'll come on to. But just to run you through some other experiences that we've told about. We had a patient that spent 4 nights in UHND. They were profoundly deaf. They didn't have an interpreter for the duration of the stay. They did ask repeatedly. They had an operation. They signed a consent form, and they didn't understand why that happened until they got home and they had the discharge letter. It was only at that point that they had that information. Another one was somebody who attended the emergency department. She was told to sit and wait, but then there was no means of her knowing, because we don't have any visual boards, and I know there's GDPR and things like that, but we don't have any visuals for deaf people. So she was just, every time she tried to communicate, she was just told to wait. There was, again, no interpreter provided. All of these occasions, the first thing that should be happening is an interpreter should be coming along. Another one is a deaf cancer patient was cancelled. She got a letter. She had no way of contacting us. And then through this positive work, and it is all positive, I assure you, it sounds negative right now, but it is all positive because we're talking to the patients, and these things, if I wasn't talking to them, these things would have been happening. We just wouldn't have known. So the thing is, right now we know and we can act on it. But what's happening as well, because of the positive engagement, because of the working group, and because of the coffee morning and getting to know these people are coming to me directly. So people are contacting me, whether it's via advocates, whether it's staff. But there was an incident that was put into Ulysses that was flagged to me about a deaf person that was on a ward in our hospital, a deaf person that had lost their hearing aids, and they were currently sat with a sheet over the head in the middle of a busy ward because they had no hearing aids. They were struggling to regulate. And because of the connection that I've made and the contacts that I've made, I was able actually there and then to do something about that, and we did actually make that better for them. So So how are we responding to this, the positive stuff? So I've touched on the mobile phone. That is sort of in place. It's in place. It's going to be in place by the end of today. I've been doing lots of meetings and talking to lots of people internally and externally. Within EPR, there's a section where you can say a person's language, so English or Polish or whatever. What I've done is I've looked into that, and actually there is a drop-down box in there. There is an option to put BSL. So that's something that we weren't really aware of, but we can do, and it's already there. It's not something that needs setting up. And the other positive thing on the back of that is if you do click BSL within EPR, it does give you an automatic alert. Does this person need a BSL interpreter? Which is fantastic because it's already there. Somebody's already had the foresight to put that in. It's just we didn't know it was there. On the back of the feedback and all of the different bits and pieces, and certainly on the back of that incident with the chap with the sheet over his head, one of the questions I asked the sister on the ward was, are there any reasonable adjustments on his record? And there was nothing. And we had a chat about that and about putting that in place, but it kind of again highlighted actually deaf people, we really need to be looking at these reasonable adjustments. There's been a lot of work around digital flags, but actually let's make this meaningful again. So I'm going back out to Keller Court, which is where we did the community event, and we're going to do a reasonable adjustment event, and I'm going to sit with individual deaf patients with an interpreter and talk to them about what a reasonable adjustment means and what for them, and then we are going to take notes, we're going to take consent, and then with the help of somebody else, we're then going to put that onto their records. So we're going to actually actively make a difference for those people. I've had a meeting with our current supplier who provides the interpreters. That there's a problem with interpreters, and it's working out where that problem lies, whether it's that they're not being booked or whether it's that they're not being provided. So that's something that I've been exploring. And also, is there a problem? Is there a bigger problem? Which there may well be in terms of a shortage. So I've been exploring that and backups. So if we can't get an interpreter, well, what do we do? Shouldn't just be a case of we can't get one. So that's also quite positive. Deaf awareness training. 100% everybody needs to have it, and we haven't done any for some time, so that I've explored many options that are all being put together currently to be looked over on a separate occasion. And then also I've been looking at something called a Health Navigator scheme, which is provided by DeafLink. Currently DeafLink provide health navigators to 3 of our northern trusts, and they can actively get involved with things like booking interpreters, understanding, and all of the bits and pieces, but that's an external company providing us with something, but that has been explored. The next steps, there are other things that we could do as a trust. We could look at an accessible chat function on our website and with our call system, so not a phone, but just like an online message, like a DM. So that's something that I've started to explore, but it's very in the early stages. Also, these videos, again, that's quite a simple thing, but it's deciding where we put BSL videos. You go onto our website, you've got a homepage, you've got many, 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 many tabs. Where do we put them? We don't want to be tokenistic. So that's something I've started to explore. There is the option to add a facility where AI would just convert it all there and then. But obviously all of these things come with extra things. There's also a company called Sign Health. They provide health resources for deaf people. So things like consent forms, information leaflets, but they will provide that in BSL. So that's something that I've started to look at. And another thing that was suggested by one of the deaf patients from the event was, why don't we have like a pager like you get in a restaurant where when it's their appointment, it goes off, Sounds a bit cheesy, but actually it would work really well, wouldn't it? So that's something that's been suggested that I'm exploring. That's it. I'll stop talking. If anybody's got any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Fantastic work. Fantastic work, Emma. Thank you so much for everything you've done there. Questions for Emma? Maggie.
Thank you for that. What support are you getting nationally? This is not a unique problem to us. So what other support are you able to access?
So nationally, none at this point. It has all been very locally driven. In terms of the support, it's been I suppose Action Deafness is a national charity. They have the contract with Durham County Council to provide the community hubs for the deaf population. So they have regional offices. So I've had a lot to do with them, which has been great. And also the engagement officer from the ICB, he's been really helpful also. I've actually, I believe that there may be, from talking to the interpreters, direct. I believe that there may be a national problem with interpreters. There's something called Access to Work, which is where if a deaf person wants to go to work, the government will pay for them to have an interpreter, which is great. It means that they can go to work and there's no barriers. What that's done is it's had a little bit of a knock-on effect on the availability of interpreters across the board. So I've actually put to my colleague at the ICB, what are they doing in terms of that shortage? But I haven't got as far as support on a national level yet, Maggie.
Lisa.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you very much for coming to the board and sharing that with us. And congratulations on your appointment as well.
Thank you, Lisa.
Really interesting. Obviously, I was aware of the work that you started to do back in November as well. How can the board support you in taking this forward?
So I've actually I've prepared a paper which I am taking to our meeting in the morning, to the executive meeting in the morning, which actually offers a lot more detail on kind of what's happening now. I had to cut it back a bit. I had quite a lot in and I had to cut it down, otherwise I would have been here all morning. And also about the legislation, about the response and what my proposals are. So I would like everybody to read that paper, please, first and foremost, and I suppose consider the options and then go from there.
Thanks very much, Emma.
Thank you.
Adam.
Thanks, Emma. I'm also going to echo the great work here. I'm going to be greedy with two questions.
That's okay.
The first one is around how are we measuring the experience of people to ensure that the great work that we're doing is making an impact? Because I think you mentioned there that I may have cited it wrong. There's not a means to put in a complaint currently. So how are we measuring the experience of people to get that? The second question, and this is one we grapple with quite a lot, is how do we widen learning so that actually the learning that we're doing that's fantastic here is widened across people who face inequalities and barriers to care across everything that we do? Because we know that if we make it better for those who find it the hardest to access care, it makes it easy for everybody. There are two questions.
That's okay. I'll try my best to answer them. So in terms of the experience, I'm not really sure. There's a lot of work going on at the moment in terms of capturing real-time kind of information from our patients. And it's about making sure that we're getting that from all of our patients. Again, it links in with the deaf awareness. Okay, so we need to make sure that when we are linking in with our patients, that we have got the means for all of our patients to communicate with us. So that's one of the things that I've already flagged that we need to be looking at. In terms of there being an accessible way for a deaf person to contact us, like right now, they're contacting via advocates or via me, actually, because they know who I am all of a sudden, and it's great because they can get somebody to email me or whatever else, which is great, and I don't mind that. But it's not sustainable really in the long term. So we need to be looking at probably the website, or like I said before, about our call system, about, there are options to upgrade things and add things onto the systems that we have in place. So it's about exploring those really. In terms of the second bit, well, this is what I keep doing. So this work came on the back of two other pieces of work. So I started off looking at hospital passports, which was primarily looking at learning disabilities and autism patients. Then I kind of rolled into reasonable adjustments. Then I kind of came along into this area. Something that's on my radar is, we're looking at deaf patients here. What about our blind patients? We need to explore that. So that will come from me and the initiatives that I'm coming from, but I am one person. Although I do have a little team that we're creating of patient safety partners who are supporting me, but they are on my radar.
Liz?
Thank you, fascinating presentation. How many deaf patients do we have using the hospital services?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'm really sorry.
Oh, no, don't apologise. That leads me to my second question. How do we identify patients who are deaf in order that we can do the things that you have suggested. And the reason that I say that is the thing that appalled me when you were speaking was the person who was being told to wait and who obviously couldn't hear that. And how was that individual identified or not identified as being deaf? That's why I'm asking about the scale and therefore the systems that would support anybody coming in and being able to be identified without being labelled.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So all of that's really bothering me, if I'm honest. And when I said I don't know the answer to that question, the reason I don't know the answer to that question is because we're not using our systems correctly. So like I said before, there is that functionality there. Somebody thought to add BSL into the language option, but nobody knew, and nobody's particularly using it. So if we were using that actively and all of our deaf patients were in the system as deaf and as BSL down as their first language, we would certainly be able to pull that report. Right now, I don't think doing that would give us an accurate picture, if I'm honest, but it's about making sure that all of the work feeds into it. It's just working out the best order in order to do it all, really, because when I keep talking a lot about empowering patients. I have a real thing about empowering patients. I have a real problem with patients that don't have a voice and patients that can't speak up, whether that's because they're not in the right environment or whether they don't have the facilities or the skill set to do it. So the event where, I'm calling it an event, when we're going back out to talk to these deaf patients about reasonable adjustments, for me, that's explaining to them that actually if we do this, if we put these reasonable adjustments on your EPR record, on your electronic patient record, if we put them on yours, when you come into hospital, there will be a flag there, and the person that's checking you in, or the person, the doctor, the nurse, whoever, will see that flag and they will know straight away. So that lady in the emergency department, if last year I'd have gone out and talked to her about reasonable adjustments and we had the flag on her system, when she came into the emergency room, that flag would have been there. And hopefully they would have thought, right, this is what we need to do. So maybe this time next year, that will be the point that we're at. But there's a lot of work to be done to get us to that.
Thank you.
No problem.
I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to take a quick question from Andrew, quick one from Lisa, finish off with Jill, and then we'll move on.
Thanks, Emma. Great presentation. I guess my question really is, how can we help get some of your messaging across to our colleagues across the organisation, and an offer rather than a question to link you in with our long-term conditions staff network group, because I think that two-way learning would be really, really valuable to the organisation. But I'm keen to understand how we can help you get some of these messages across to our colleagues to help make your life a little bit easier in this.
Thanks,
Andrew.
Andrew. Thank you. So I think, like I said before about the paper that I've prepared, that paper is really, it's 14 pages long, and I think it's not complicated. It's just all laid out very simply. I think sharing that with as many of your colleagues as you can, who can then cascade the messages down. But we need to break this down. I started off with an action plan back in November, which was on an Excel document that became 10 tabs, that became something else, because there's so much work that needs to be done. So really it's about the understanding and the acceptance that there is an issue, and the right people coming together with me, whoever they are, to get in place a meaningful action plan. And I'd love to be involved in that group, please. Thank you.
Lisa?
Chair, mine wasn't a question really, it was just to support Emma further. Emma, in her role as a volunteer before she became a member of staff, has brought to the board's attention on a number of occasions how we listen to that patient voice and how we act on that patient experience, and that's something I feel we need to take much more impact on in terms of our response as a board. The issue of reasonable adjustment doesn't just sit in this particular category of BSL. It is something, Liz, we've asked the question before, how many people need reasonable adjustments, and we're not able to give that answer at this point in time in the organisation. So for me as a board, we need to take that action to understand how we how we understand our population and how we support them better within our services. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. And final word to Jill.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Emma. Great presentation. It's probably building on comments that have already been made. There's something for me about this work is proactively asking people. It's not responding to concerns that come to us, and we need to be much better at proactively understanding experience. The real-time work that we're rolling out will give us the facility, if we record flags appropriately, to go and understand the experience of people with all sorts of different needs and sort of target their experience with us in a much more systematic way, which we absolutely need to do. Emma's paper will be coming to Patient Safety and Experience Group tomorrow, and we need to have a strategic way of looking at our proactive patient experience and making sure that it comes through our governance processes and is rolled out. And it begins with all of the things that Emma has said about identifying patients and then making sure reasonable adjustments are in place. So it's a broader piece of work, but we need to harness Emma's enthusiasm and commitment and make sure that that is embedded in the work that we do. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jill. And thank you, Emma, for everything you've done and for coming today and making that plea on behalf of people that need to be championed in our organisation. So thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the Chair's report. I'm very conscious that having asked others to introduce themselves, I didn't at the beginning. So I am Alison Marshall. I'm the Interim Trust Chair. I just want to start today to acknowledge that it is National Volunteers Week this week. We get a tremendous value from our numerous volunteers across our organisation. They do all sorts of things for us in their own time. And the commitment they give us is of such value both to our patients and our communities, but also to our colleagues who work with us and who really appreciate the help that they get. So just wanted to acknowledge those volunteers. Of course, our governors are also volunteers. They give a lot of their time, support us, bring that patient voice into the organisation. So I just want to thank them as well in Volunteer Week for all that they do, for their time and their contribution. So that leads me on to the work we've been doing with governors. We're working on the ways of working with our governor colleagues, and that has continued. And one of the things that we've done in relation to that is look at the board leadership visits, which we'll come on to in a little while, and the work that we're doing to try and bring that picture from our clinical areas back into our boardroom. We had a Council of Governors meeting last week or the week before, where we looked as well at the Freedom to Speak Up function in our organisation. It's really important to us and to the governors that people feel able to speak up and bring their concerns to their line managers, to the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, to whoever they feel most comfortable with, but that we need to hear those voices across our organisation, and we'll be coming back to a report from our Freedom to Speak Up Guardian later in the agenda. Since we last met, the NHS Modernisation Bill, otherwise known as a Health Bill, has been published. That could potentially have an impact on our Council of Governors, in that the proposal is that they be abolished. The councils themselves and our membership as well. So we need to work with our Council of Governors and other colleagues in relation to how that patient, we don't lose anything of that patient voice. And you'll see some of the work that Emma's doing around patient voice. So we need to make sure we wrap around what we already have and complement it. The bill has other implications. Of course, it will involve the abolition of NHSE, which will make quite a difference to the way in which we are regulated. And other things such as a single patient record could make a significant difference to our working arrangements as well. So we'll keep a close eye on that bill as it progresses through Parliament. I welcomed new board members sitting around the table. We've continued with our board development since our last board meeting, to try to maximise the impact that we can have as a board. working as a unitary board. We're very conscious we have a lot of new faces around our table, and we need to be able to very quickly get to know one another, get to respect each other's contributions to debates and issues, and to work together for the benefit of this organisation. We're also working on topics for board development days. So just to let colleagues know, there will be information coming round shortly in relation to some potential topics for future board development. Obviously, very welcome any feedback in relation to that and any other topics that you think should be included in that forward planner. We've got a board forward plan for the public board on our agenda today. We haven't had that up to now, so we're just trying to get a bit of a regular rhythm in relation to what's coming up to board and when. So again, that's in the pack. If anyone has any comments, then either feed them back in a minute or when we've after this meeting, if that would help. We've been working, put a considerable amount of work into governance arrangements throughout the organisation. It's very much part of the undertakings that we entered into with NHSE some time ago to make sure that those governance arrangements are fit for purpose and working to bring the voice of the organisation from ward to board. Jill's going to speak to that shortly. She's also going to speak in that context on the board leadership visits that we have established as well. We were intending to bring a paper to this board in relation to the first of those board leadership visits, but we've had not quite enough of them yet to be pulling themes out, so they will be coming instead to the next and thereafter to every board, every public board that we have via the Quality Committee, and Jill will deal with that in a minute. Are there any questions on that before I hand over to Jill in terms of that governance paper? No, all yours, Jill.
Thank you, Alison. Jill Hunt, Chief Nurse for the organisation. So the paper talks about our emerging governance structure, and there's been a significant amount of work in recent months to roll out and embed our governance structures, and the paper details the work around our board committees and our 6 executive groups, plus an executive-led group around risk and compliance and policy sign-off. I think it's fair to say that those groups are functioning as you would expect, with a good use of AAA reports to escalate to board. In the paper, the graph on 1.1 details in a schematic way our governance from level 1 to level 5, so from ward or department right up to board, and talks about that two-way flow, assurance and accountability. In terms of the schematic 1.3 gives a detailed description of the governance structure, which is helpful in terms of understanding how that works. I think it's fair to say our current focus is working with our care group colleagues on care group governance and speciality governance, really to embed that and to make sure that the AAA reporting from those groups is robust. Colleagues understand what good assurance looks like, so curious or triangulating data. We'll be using the emerging integrated quality and performance report for that process, and colleagues are getting alongside specialities. We've got core agendas, we've got core terms of reference to make sure a level of consistency within the organisation. So that there's a piece around systems and processes, and then there's a piece around supporting staff to be able to manage that governance process, which I think is probably where our key focus is in the coming weeks and months. We have established monthly quality and performance meetings with all of our care groups. They're exec-led, all of the execs attend those and get into the detail of care group performance in terms of quality, finance, performance and workforce. And then we also have escalations from specialities and care groups through to the executive-led groups on specific topic areas. The paper details our collective leadership team, which is a formal group which reports to board. That is made up of executive colleagues and then senior colleagues from both care groups and the corporate team. And that forum is a really important forum in terms of our strategic direction and to bring recommendations for board and to work through some of our challenges, opportunities and plans. So I guess in summary, I would say that the role of the board committees and exec-led groups has clearly been strengthened and is working well, and our focus needs to be on care group and speciality governance and embedding that and ensuring capability and capacity to lead within those settings.
Could you just touch on board leadership visits?
Yes, thank you, Alison. Board leadership visits are part of our triangulation of what we see. So we have qualitative and quantitative data, but actually looking and seeing and understanding what it feels like to be a patient in our services, or a carer of a patient in our services, or a member of staff is critical. As part of the revised governance structure, there is a formal ward assurance process with the aim of every ward and department in our organisation being visited within a year. That team is made up of an executive colleague, a non-executive colleague and a governor, and there's a formal process based on the 15-step challenge. There's a formal process around the environment and what does that look and feel like, and then there are opportunities to speak with both patients and carers and seek their feedback, and then to speak with staff and to understand what it feels like to work in those areas, what's working really well, where are the areas of risk and challenge. These visits started in April. Between April and May there have been 8 visits on both the UHND, DMH Bishop site, and myself and 2 colleagues went to Weardale last Friday. Verbal feedback is given at the time, both what we've seen that's working well, where there might be areas for improvement, and that's followed up with a written report. We will be really clear about going back to close the loop, because I think where we've seen things that need improvement, we need to go back and check that that's happened. There are local things that the wards and departments can do themselves. There are bigger things for us to consider, and it's making sure that we collectively take action there. To date, I would say there's been an awful lot of positive feedback from patients and carers, which is really good to hear. There's an awful lot around the environment, both in terms of equipment, clutter, notices that actually locally we can act upon. And then there's some bigger environmental issues that are really apparent that we need to make sure are embedded in our plans. They've been well received. Colleagues have enjoyed seeing us, and it's felt a really positive two-way experience. So we will be bringing a paper through to Quality Committee on a regular basis and reporting through to board with the themes and, more importantly, what actions we've taken to address the themes.
Thank you, Jill. Martin.
Martin Knowles, non-exec. Thanks, Jill, because you've done fantastic work on this. And I probably should also thank Warren and Rob, because all the work at kind of that exec board level has been great. Often in these governance structures, though, the real challenges around those care groups and specialty level. And I'm particularly thinking of our performance at the moment. Clearly, when we do the report from Finance and Performance, we'll have concerns around many of our performance metrics. So it's the care groups and the specialty levels that will affect change. Can you give us a sense of how that work's progressing? You know, we're halfway through, or just at the beginning of that path, and then when you feel that work will reach a reasonable maturity? Sorry, that's a long question.
Thank you. The systems and processes that you've talked about, and you're absolutely right, colleagues have done a huge amount of work on developing those systems and processes. But on their own, they're sort of half the story, aren't they? The most important thing is making sure that we have people who have the skills, capability and capacity to enable that to happen. And that work is associated with roles and responsibilities, assessment of any gaps in knowledge and skills and training, and that work is happening. I think it's probably variable, Martin, I would say, and it's work in progress. But I think if I think from a nursing midwifery AHP perspective, there are a core set of skills that I would expect a matron to have, and I want to do that work to say, has everyone got those core skills? If not, how do we support them to have that? And that will be the same with operational colleagues, general managers, etc. And that is work in progress, which is, I think, why we really need to get alongside people to support them in that journey, and get alongside people because it's a different way of working. So there's a skills issue for us to be assured about, and then there's a coaching approach to making sure people get where they need to be. So I would say it's work in progress. I don't know if any other colleagues would want to come in.
Rob?
Yeah, I think Jill's right. We've now sort of helped people facilitate some of these sessions by actually sort of giving a bit more structure, suggested agenda items, and also ensuring that the data is consistent as well. Because I think there's absolutely no point in trying to have ward-to-board governance if you're using different data sources. So we've also spent a lot of time trying to define what should be sort of specialty level, because we all know what wards are, we always know what the care groups are, but I think there's been some disparity over what sort of that middle tier, sort of level 4 as we've described it is as well. Certainly they are beginning to happen. If anyone was on the exec corridor yesterday, there was a specialty-led governance meeting where lots and lots of people were going through the corridor. So they are happening. I think it is early days, but I think we've been able to enable that through giving some structure and governance as well, which we've just got to make sure there's a line.
Steve?
Yeah, thanks. Just to your point, Martin, all of the things that Jill and Rob have described are really important and they're necessary, but they're not sufficient. So to just be a bit more direct about it, the culture in which those arrangements sit still needs work. So it's right to put all of that in. Jill's absolutely right that we need to support people to work in a slightly different way, but we still need to keep pretty laser focused on helping colleagues develop stronger senses of curiosity. And when you are, it's one thing to see for the data to flow through, you've got to kind of be able to look at it and go, ooh, I think there is something there that we need to explore a bit. That's really strong in some areas, but I would say as an organisation, we are still further away than we would want to be in terms of that general curiosity. And, again, being candid, in some areas we're probably, or teams can be a bit defensive. And so that's not new news to the board. That was part of what staff and colleagues said to Mary Aubrey and so on, but it would be wrong not to just acknowledge that we are still, at the foothills of the work on that.
Sorry, just through the chair, there's also a pace thing there, I guess, Steve, given where we are.
Lisa?
Thank you, Chair. Lisa Quinn, non-executive. Jill, thank you very much for the report. I find the report really helpful, really clear, and particularly like the slide on page 3 that shares out the core governance arrangements across the 5 different levels. Hopefully that will provide a level of clarity across the organisation that people will understand. I guess coming back to your point about where our focus needs to be, and I'm going to be a bit challenging to us as a board, we need to lead by example. Our board papers today have level 2 groups calling themselves committees. We have AAAs that are inconsistent in style and format from our committees, and we have papers of different styles. So I feel we need to lead by example as a board and challenge ourselves to get to a better consistency point by the next board meeting, to demonstrate our adherence and our consistency to these governance rules, which I think are great. We just need to live them as well. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, good point, Lisa. Adam?
Adam Cramsey, Non-Exec Director.
So I absolutely welcome this framework, and it's what we've been crying out for and needing. And certainly from a quality committee perspective, we're starting to see the benefits of what's flowing up from the patient safety experience group and the clinical effectiveness group. So green shoots of positivity on that assurance flow. But many of the issues that we're facing as a trust were not unknown to us. And there were things that were not escalated, not acted upon in a timely fashion historically. How confident are we that this new governance structure arrangements that we have will fix that? And how do we as a board assure ourselves that that new governance structure is delivering the unknown unknowns and being more proactive rather than our current state of reactive?
Thank you, Adam. It's a great question, and I think it builds on Steve's comments around culture and curiosity. And I think it feels at the moment that we are probably much more directive and hands-on than we perhaps would be in an organisation that had a mature system and mature leaders who were sufficiently curious themselves. So I think we're doing lots of deep dives and looking at things because we're not assured. And actually the vision needs to be that actually that happens at a much more local level, and that, you know, that people are looking for issues and identifying issues rather than waiting for incidents to happen. So I think we've got a way to go, but I think that's why we're all acting in that sort of much more deep dive fashion than we would in an organisation that wasn't where we are.
Sorry, the question was about how do we assure ourselves as a board that we're there, because what's the tipping point? Yeah. Sorry to challenge back.
No, it's absolutely fine. I mean, I think with our emerging IQPR, that gives that visibility of data to all of us, and we need to look at hotspots and go in and check, challenge, understand. I think, you know, we have a number of examples where we are looking at bringing in people to do a review for us in areas that we are concerned about, to give us an assessment independently of where we need to look quickly. And there's a number of areas that I think we'll probably pick up later in the board where we're doing that work.
I think once we feel that we've got the whole process established right through all those layers, we need to have some sort of evaluation process, whatever that is, and the exec can come back with some ideas in that front. Rob, do you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Rob Clark, interim CFO. I think this is the framework. This is the sort of starting point. When we first started, or when I started back in November, we often talked about pulling levers at board level and it never getting beyond sort of the first tier of management. And that's because we didn't have line of sight of how that worked. And we didn't have consistency. So I think this is very, very early days still. But having this allows us to see where it should flow and how it should flow. And equally, the arrows on the diagram we're all talking to, they're two-way. So I think it's also about our staff having a mechanism for how they escalate and feeling confident that if they do, that it will be heard. And I think that's the important thing we need to check and challenge as well, that they feel it going the other way. So absolutely agree with you, Adam. This is really just a starting point, but we didn't even have this previously. So I think we need to build from this. We need to communicate this actively across the organisation and make sure all those systems and structures are working.
Hayley.
Thank you. Hayley Wardle, incoming CFO. So apologies if I'm asking a more detailed question than I normally would, but I'll use the new card for a little while. So assurance goes up and down. I can see that. I think the table is really helpful. The diagram is really helpful, especially to someone new to the organisation. I've got two particular questions. One, does this interact and should it or correlate with the risk register to understand kind of how we're getting that escalation up and back down? And then do we have any areas, and where would it be that we've got lateral assurance? So where we're taking learnings from each care group, because there will be a lot of commonalities about the issues between care groups, staffing particularly, maybe one of an example. And how are we taking that and kind of applying that across everybody? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hayley. There's been a significant amount of work from colleagues around the table on our risk, our approach to risk, which has been criticised in a number of public reports, and is something we absolutely accepted that we needed to do something differently. So there has been a review of risk registers, there's been a review of corporate risk, there's been a review of the board assurance framework, and we have I think we've met 3 times now with the risk and compliance meeting, which does give an opportunity for cross-care group risks to be identified. So we're looking at risks within care groups, but then we're looking at risks that go across pathways to make sure that that's joined up. I think the other piece, if I think about some of our external reports like CQC into surgery, actually there are many issues that are potentially relevant across all care groups. So that work is part of our integrated improvement approach, that actually it might have been an issue on this site in these areas, but actually we need to be assured across the board. So that work is happening.
Rob.
Sorry, just to also flag on that one, we do a lot of triangulation. So I think from the committee structures, as in subcommittees of the board, but also the groups, we're trying to ensure that there's crossover and triangulation. So you'll have non-execs who sit on the finance committee, who also sit on the quality committee, and that goes into the exec committees as well. And then we're trying to encourage, as Jill said, sort of that level of challenge and sight and oversight across care groups, because there will be lessons learned and important things that arise in one care group that should be shared and learned across the organisation. So that's also being overlaid.
Great, good conversation. I'm just going to stop it there, Lisa, if that's all right. I'm just conscious of time. I think we'll note those new governance arrangements and we'll look for them to embed and mature and come back with an evaluation of how they have improved our organisation. Going to move on to the Chief Executive report from Steve, please.
Thank you, Alison. Hello, my name's Steve. I'm the Chief Exec here at the Trust. So I'll take the paper largely as read, but just to concentrate on summarising a few areas, and I might just quickly try and pick up Hayley's lateral assurance point as well, which is the hardest question so far. Colleagues will be aware that we've now agreed our plan for this year with NHS England. There are some conditions around that are set out in the paper which require us to provide further information and detail on how we will deliver the changes that we've set out on reducing waiting times for people on cancer pathways, how we'll reduce our elective waiting list, and the action that we'll take to reduce sickness. We're in regular discussion across the organisation and with NHS England on those points, because they've asked to do some deep dives with us, and all of those issues will be overseen through the relevant board committees. As colleagues know, we ended up resetting our year 1 plan, so the plan for 26-27, which originally was a 3-year plan, and what that means is that years 2 and 3 are now out of sync. And so in the discussion with NHS England over the last few weeks, we have discussed and agreed with them that we'll need to refresh year 2 and 3. In effect, we'll need to replan, which is not an insignificant challenge or undertaking. And as you'll see in the paper, we've agreed that the first part of that will be setting out our assumptions about what is possible and deliverable in each of those 2 years by September, in concert with the Integrated Care Board. And then we'll go through a period of discussion with internally, obviously, but also with NHS England between September and December. Not to get into the detail too much, but I expect that process will throw out some quite significant challenges for us. NHS England have flagged that they would expect us to meet the standards that were originally set out in the planning guidance, and board colleagues will recall that our 3-year recovery plan that was first submitted didn't get us there by year 3, particularly in the context of RTT. So there'll be some quite significant issues that we need to work through. I've also popped in the note just 4 areas that NHS England are asking us all to concentrate on as part of the plan for this year. And just to draw out a couple in particular, one is around outpatient transformation. That's a really important issue for us. We have a plan that needs further development, but we are starting in musculoskeletal and dermatology. Musculoskeletal changes, moving to patient self-referral, digital triage, and their different use of specialist practitioners. The pilot that's been running for the last few months has moved the time to assessment from about 4 weeks to 48 hours. And that's due to be rolled out in July. And again, we'll roll some of that approach out to dermatology. And we've engaged with an organisation that helped provide a digital platform that will help us deliver some of the changes. And the other area of focus that's going to be particularly important ahead of winter is our approach to vulnerable patient groups, our high-risk cohorts who are at higher risk of hospital admission. And Jen Steele is leading a piece of work where we're likely to focus on respiratory as a group in the first instance. Strategically, a couple of areas just to flag. Board, we've discussed this in board before, but ourselves and South Tyneside and Sunderland Trust have announced our alliance in the central patch, or in the heart of the northeast, as we like to call it. And Hayley and Lorraine Nelson, who will be well known to colleagues, are important parts of that alliance. We're keen to get that up and running and on the go. The first meeting will take place in June of the partnership group, and we've got some initial areas where we intend to collaborate in the interests of our patients across the central patch, and also to address some of the workforce fragilities that exist. We've talked a lot about the need to improve our elective activity and performance, and we know that we can treat patients more quickly and more efficiently in our elective hub at Bishop Auckland. That's now had a visit from the National Getting It Right First Time team, it's a bit of a mouthful, which was the second visit. We didn't secure accreditation on the first one, which was about a year ago. As you'll see from the note, this is the team's work, not mine. That's been accredited, which is fantastic for the team. They are delighted. And importantly, it means patients are getting treatment more quickly. You'll see there's some areas that they've helpfully pointed out for us to kind of go further on. We were chatting to the pre-assessment team about one of those the other day when Rob and Jill and I were with them. So it's some continued work that we can do, but a big opportunity for us. And then finally, we've, again, talked in board before, but we're just in the process of finalising the business case for the clinical strategy work, which will underpin that year 2 and year 3 piece. I flagged in my report that we continue to have, as you'll understand, close engagement with our regulators. We've got an integrated oversight meeting with NHS England, and as colleagues will remember, all organisations had their capability assessed, and we participated in a self-assessment. Last year we rated ourselves as red. We're in the middle of all of the changes that Alison described earlier, and we are, we've still got a long journey to go on, but NHS England have suggested that we should update our provider capability assessment to reflect some of the changes that have been made, and the board will consider that in private initially. And I've also just flagged for board colleagues that we continue to engage with the CQC. We expect to have the surgery community and well-led reports published in the next week or so. We don't have a date for that yet, but hopefully that will get confirmed soon. And as you'll see from my note, we're in continued discussion with them about a couple of areas of concern associated with the historical practice in breast and the use of LLPs. I've flagged for board a couple of areas around quality. So remember that in Safe, Effective and Accountable, which was our response to the Mary Aubrey report, we set out that we would explore fragile services, and we've engaged some external support, as Jill mentioned earlier, to help us with a couple of services. One is plastic surgery and one is general surgery. And they will just help us understand those services in a little bit more detail. The plastic surgery work has commenced, the general surgery work has not yet started. And as part of our our sort of broader work on fragile services, we've been discussing with some regional and local partners how we might take a more structured approach to that. You'll remember that colleagues have raised this in Quality Committee, and we'll bring a proposal back there. But NHS England have also suggested that they've got a fragile services tool, and that will also be an important piece of us looking collectively with colleagues in the Alliance about where we've got joint fragile services that we should be concentrating on. And then another key commitment that we made in Safe, Effective and Accountable was to explore and address the issues around the engagement of locum consultants. We've completed a consultation on that, and there are a set of changes, including name changes and a policy and a framework around credentialing and autonomous practice that will come in from the 1st of July. I'm sure Martin will pick this up under finance and performance, as will Rob, but we still have a significant financial challenge ahead of us and have work to do following challenge from the committee to further develop and de-risk the cost reduction programme. We agreed to do that over the coming couple of weeks, well now about 10 days, and Matt and Rob have particularly been leading work on that. That remains risky, but has the support of the full exec team and more broadly that of the care group colleagues. And you'll see again from my report that we've completed the first round of voluntary severance and have agreed a number of exits from the organisation which are being considered by colleagues at the moment. And then 2 final points. One was just to flag to colleagues, Alison mentioned that we've got a report from Mel, our Freedom Speak Up Guardian, later. I thought it was just helpful to flag that as part of the changes nationally, the National Guardian's Office is being abolished and some of the responsibilities will transfer to different organisations, including providers. So there are 3 specific responsibilities that transfer to us around provision of information to NHS England, induction and making information available to our staff, our colleagues rather, and more generally about who our Freedom to Speak Up Guardian is and the arrangements for contacting them. Those all need to come into play by the 1st of July and stuff is in hand to make sure that we're able to do that. And as Alison mentioned, separately to those changes, we've been considering the support to Freedom to Speak Up. And as Mel, I'm sure will say herself, it's not about one person, but reflecting where we are, I've agreed with Mel that she'll have a bit more time and a bit more flexibility in how she uses her time to better support colleagues across the organisation. And then the final thing I just wanted to say, but I was going to apologise anyway, but Lisa has teed this up. Collective Leadership Team is the kind of senior leadership forum that manages the organisation on a day-to-day basis. But in good governance, there would be a link to board. And so we've established that through the AAA reports. Mine are the ones that are the worst in their formatting. So I will just acknowledge that and apologise for that. And we'll try and make sure that those are strengthened. I will try and make sure those are strengthened for the next meeting, but it hopefully will start to give you a bit of a sense of what CLT is talking about. There needs to be a bit more focus on what we're actually doing, but you'll see that lots of the discussions reflects the areas of concern and priority. You'll see hopefully that there was a discussion, we might not read behind it, but there was a discussion about the governance changes that Jill was talking to earlier and the need for those to be embedded and so on and so forth. And again, just to maybe offer a bit of reassurance rather than assurance, just on the lateral piece, there is a AAA report, there are several AAA reports that come into CLT now that didn't before. One of those is from a consolidated one from all of the care group performance reviews. And that, again, just give a bit of reassurance, again, although there's lots of development for us still to do, that flagged an issue around medication safety into CLT that needed some action. So there's still work for us to do, but those are sort of the early ways that we're trying to strengthen the arrangements. And the final thing I just wanted to say was just colleagues will know this, but we have strike action coming in the not too distant future again. Usual arrangements are in place, but they take a toll on colleagues and also have an impact on patients. I'll stop there, Alison.
Thanks, Steve. I've got Maggie, Adam, and then Liz. Maggie.
Thank you. Maggie Pavel, Non-Exec Director. Lots of stuff. Thank you very much for that and a good breadth of stuff. I think what I struggle with just a little bit is you've used the word strategically, and then we've got a lot of practical stuff in there, and it's just how is it all coming together in terms of the assurance from the board and the strategic things that we've really got to keep an eye on that are keeping everybody awake up at night, and probably yourself. Don't get lost in the mire of all of the other reactionary problem-solving stuff that you have to do.
Hayley's question was now not the hardest of the meeting. So it's a very fair point, Maggie. And one of the things that you'll see, and you might have noticed in the AAA in CLT, was a discussion about priorities. So we have agreed 6 strategic objectives in the board for the next couple of years, whilst we're in the sort of more turnaround and sort of Martin's point on pace. And we've done some work to try and set out what the priorities are for 26-27. So the first steps around achieving progress against those 6 objectives. We're doing a bit of testing with colleagues internally about those before we finally bring them to board for agreement through the roadshows. Adam was on one yesterday. We're getting some helpful feedback, but that should be a useful frame for where are we heading strategically, and then how do the things that we're doing add to where we need to get to. The additional honest answer is there's still quite a lot of discovery going on, and there are lots of issues that surface that we do need to react to because they're in front of us, and they have either an impact on patient experience, colleague experience, value for money, etc. So it's not a static list, but I think the feedback we've had from colleagues is just having the kind of check, I suppose, that the things that we're focusing on are related to our 6 objectives and how we'll sort of move forward will be helpful. But the reality is prioritisation will remain difficult for us.
Adam.
Thanks, Steve. Cast your mind back to November of last year. I asked you a question about capacity and capability. We're all vying for the most complicated question. I asked you about capacity and capability when you put up the original plan. 7 months on, given the sheer amount of work that we've got to do, what's your assessment of that capacity and capability? Not in this room, because this has changed, further across the organisation and trust. And is there a risk that we're not moving at pace on some things because we haven't got the capacity and capability, which might start to lead to some pace challenges in this room?
Now I'm going to have to write down every question I get asked from every meeting and bring them back in. So, completely fair question. You anticipated the answer I was going to give you and told me I'm not allowed to use that quite reasonably. So I think our capacity and capability has not materially changed since November in the broader organisation. Much of our focus has been on the exec team and board. We have, in addition to the board development, got Co-Create doing some development with the collective leadership team, and we intend to do more of that with the broader care group and specialties. But I would say that remains an area of challenge for us. It's not the same everywhere. It's different. So it's high in some areas, it's lower in others, and I think we've got a reasonable handle on where those strengths and fragilities are. And to your question on will that lead to challenges in pace, yes, and it's already doing so. Jill made a comment earlier about colleagues being quite grippy and directive over stuff. And that is partly because we haven't yet got the capacity and capability everywhere. So it is already leading to challenges on pace.
Liz. Thank you. Liz Bromley, non-exec. I think my question is going to be a crossover between the practical doing, the strategic ambition, the pace and the difficulty. So I'm really sorry. Voluntary severance scheme, only a quarter of the number that we are looking for. Obviously that impacts on people, culture and finance. So without going into the detail, which we don't need, what are you doing or what is being done to ensure that those targets can be met, which will then have an impact on the finances, the people, the culture? Thank you.
Yeah. So I think there's a sort of technical part to that, Liz, and a cultural part. Our changes to the shape of the organisation and our workforce is underpinned by sort of 3 or 4 different things. One part is voluntary severance. The second is the organisation had a large number of fixed-term contracts, and a number of those will come to an end during this financial year as part of those plans. And then the third is the service changes that are being developed and considered as part of the CIP. So, as you say, there was around 50 through voluntary severance. We expect around 50 through ending of fixed-term contracts. There are currently a couple of hundred associated with potential service changes. That does not yet get us completely to our goal, as it were, and that sort of links back to the point on we need to further develop some of the cost reduction schemes and de-risk some of them. We will likely run further rounds of voluntary exit, both on a broad basis but also on a targeted basis. So that's a sort of technical answer. The cultural part to this is this has a really big impact on morale, and it does so in a number of ways. There are colleagues who have signalled that they would have liked to take the opportunity to exit the organisation that we have not supported, and we've not been able to support for good reason. But when that happens, often those colleagues, their personal morale and motivation can feel impacted because they've set out that they would like to make a change, and we're not able to support that. And then more broadly, there is, I think the thing that colleagues have reflected to us is one of the big morale impacts is on the uncertainty. So that is a combination of the uncertainty around, am I going to be affected? Because we haven't completely developed all of the schemes or started consultation. And the other uncertainty is we all get used to kind of teams being set up in a certain way and having certain numbers of colleagues in them. And so there's an uncertainty around how will we manage as changes arise, and how will work and prioritisation change. So that's just me telling you all the problems. The approach we're trying to take is to be as open as we can be, to listen. Some teams reach out directly, and we're trying to respond to those. But the biggest focus for us is to try and complete the work on where change will need to happen, and then to start it, so that people have got certainty, if nothing else.
So what's your timescale?
So we've committed to try and kind of get to our target for the CIP by the end of, which month are we in now? This month. Yeah, we're in June officially, so end of this month. I am not completely convinced that we'll get totally there, but we'll be further than we are. And then in around July time, we are likely to run a further round of voluntary exit.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Phil Kane, Non-Executive Director. There's one of the tiny paragraphs which has a bit of nitty-gritty in it. The change in title, or the use of the title consultant, does that have any impact on the delivery of clinical services? Would be the first question, and the follow-on to that would be anybody who's affected by it, would they be supported through a CSER process?
Yeah, really important questions, Phil. So CDDF, let me go backwards. I think the first thing I want to just, again, it's in the paper, but it's important to say that the colleagues who are impacted by this, it's not of their making. The Trust made a decision to engage colleagues who are not on the specialist register as locum consultants. However, as everyone knows, that is not what you would usually expect to do. And what you would usually expect to do is engage colleagues in a specialty doctor arrangement with support to complete a portfolio pathway over a period of time. That also was not in place in the trust. So we've gone through the consultation, obviously. Colleagues have fed back through that consultation about their views on the change. The change is not, it is causing anxiety and is not universally welcomed. And some colleagues have signalled that if we make the changes, they may consider their options, and that's a personal matter in the end. So there are some potential risks to service. We think that those can be mitigated largely, but in the end, it is partly dependent on what decisions individuals make. The second part to that is some of these services we need to reshape anyway, because the increase in locum consultants was based on a set of service changes that were agreed a couple of years ago that are not necessarily the service changes that we would now want to have in place. And to your sort of final point, yes, we will put in place. Actually, the middle point I want to make. One of the important things is to put the credentialing and autonomous working policy in place. So it's, you'll know, but it is perfectly possible to be a specialty doctor who works to a high standard and to a very high level of clinical practice, including being accredited as a specialist as opposed to a specialty doctor. That framework hasn't been in place here. We've developed it as part of this process, and colleagues will have an opportunity to go through a credentialing and an autonomous working framework. Those things are important to mitigate the impact on service, but to do in a properly governed way with proper assessment of competence.
I had two, but you'll be glad that Phil did one, so I only have one now. Again, thanks very much for your report. In your May AAA, you talk about the core strategic priority around neighbourhood health, but also acknowledge risk to delivery. Could you say a little bit more about how that's been taken forward in the organisation?
Yeah, so as part of both our priorities and the national focus on neighbourhood health, Jen Steele led a discussion about the arrangements in County Durham and Darlington, and sort of provoked CLT to have a discussion about, well, is this a priority for us given that everything else that the organisation is wrestling with? And we had our public health consultant colleagues with us as part of that discussion. And although there is an awful lot to tackle that's like immediately in front of us, colleagues in that discussion agreed that this is one of the ways to improve the health of the local population, which is what we're here for, and also is a way to address some of the challenges that we've got. What we did agree is that we couldn't do everything, and so we're going to pick a disease group. It's likely respiratory, as I said, but we're also not going to do that in every part of our community, as it were. We'll concentrate in the areas, in the wards, so the wards of people's communities as opposed to our hospital wards, where we know that there's a higher incidence of illness, usually higher deprivation and poverty, therefore higher need, and we'll concentrate on those specific communities rather than trying to do it absolutely everywhere. And we're very fortunate that we've got services like Health Squad and our public health consultants, because many of the interventions are about not just the specialist respiratory management, but the broader health and wellbeing support that you offer to those people. So that's where we're going to start. We're working closely with colleagues about how we identify the cohorts. As everyone uses slightly different risk tools, but it doesn't matter. We just need to identify and then start to look at the potential pilots around support. Thanks,
Steve. We'll take your report as an update and for assurance. Moving on to the integrated improvement plan, Jill, I'm very conscious we are quite behind time now, so if we can just take that as read and draw out anything that you need to, please.
Thank you, Alison. So the paper details the progress with the integrated improvement plan, as colleagues are aware. The integrated improvement plan covers actions arising from our CQC warning notices during the time of the inspections in surgery and the well-led. It also covers the Aubrey report, Royal College of Surgeons and Royal College of Radiology reports associated with breast, and they'll be discussed later on in a separate agenda item, and also the Worthington report into financial governance and culture. Kelly Angus, our Deputy Chief Executive, is taking a lead around our integrated improvement plan when we receive our 3 CQC reports to make sure that we pull our improvement plan together in a manageable and meaningful way, and that we're really clear on testing of assurance in terms of putting things into themes and then specific actions. If I just focus on surgery and well-led briefly, you can see in the paper that from a surgical perspective, the majority of the actions have been completed. The focus is on embedding and sustaining, and at the fortnightly meeting with all care groups, making sure that that's replicated across the organisation. In terms of the well-led actions, a lot of the well-led actions cross over with Aubrey and other findings, and the progress has been listed there in terms of where we are with those actions. The outstanding actions are largely around training, and these were training programs that we've put in place in response to the findings, so they're from a 0% starting position. So we continue to roll out the training around risk and management of complaints and incidents. The other area for further focus is the embedding of speciality governance, which we've already touched upon. In terms of the open incidents and complaints, progress has been made and reductions have been made. Areas where the pace has not been as expected, I've met individually with all care groups and agreed a trajectory till the end of June to complete closure of the overdue incidents and complaints, but are spending a proportionate amount of time on improving patient experience to reduce complaints. So there's that balance in terms of the piece of work. The paper details improvements around financial governance and the governance structures that have been strengthened. And as Steve already mentioned, our improvement journey is subject to oversight by NHS England, our commissioners and the CQC on a monthly basis. So happy to take any questions, Alison.
Adam.
Thanks, Jill. And I know we look at this in Quality Committee in quite a lot of detail, but I'm going to be quite challenging, particularly on the 29A actions. 53% of them are in this report as being off track. And I completely appreciate your point that a lot of this is linked to training that we've implemented as new, so a low starting base. But 53% are off track, which just gives a level of potential concern around the pace of delivery, or did we just set unrealistic timeframes for us to deliver them within?
Thanks, Adam. Potentially both, potentially pace of delivery and quite ambitious targets. I mean, there's so many pieces that make up the action plans. And I think the important piece is if we are off track, we've got a trajectory for when we'll be back on track, and also that risk is mitigated. So, for example, if I think of one where we were off track in terms of training a specific group of clinical colleagues in a specific task, while that training was happening, we made sure that there was somebody on duty at every time on that ward who was competent. So it's that mitigation as well. But you're absolutely right. It's the pace needs to step up. And I think when we look at the 3 reports that will come through, the vast majority of actions are in the warning notices, but we need to get them closed off. We need to make sure they're embedded as business as usual. So it's a fair challenge.
Anything else for Jill? No. Okay, we'll note that progress, and we'll see next board how far we've got, Jill. Thank you. Moving on to the breast review report. This is a report on where we are with our breast services. just as we always do want to acknowledge that our breast services did harm women in our care, and we have them very much in our thoughts as we discuss this item today. Jill.
Thank you, Alison. Matt, Shafi and I are going to do a triple act, so I think Matt is starting us off. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Matt Graham, I'm the Acting Chief Operating Officer. So I was going to pick up two parts of the report, one on the sort of actions we're taking regionally, and second on the current service position. So I'm really pleased to say that we have now signed the MOU with Newcastle upon Tyne Hospitals for a long-term partnership. That will really support us with both the governance of the service and also the long-term workforce model for the service. We're also continuing to work really closely with partners across the whole of the North East and North Cumbria, particularly with the Cancer Alliance and with the other trusts and the ICB, to look at the model of the service and the level of capacity which is required in each trust in order to get the service back on a stable footing. Within the trust ourselves, you'll be aware that we have a cap on referrals at the moment of 80. Over the last few months, we've delivered more activity than that, up to 87, an average of 87 one-stop breast clinic appointments each week, and we've had a lower level of referrals than that on average. So that has enabled us to eat into the backlog of patients waiting longer than they should be, and that's in the middle of May, that was down to 140 patients. Over the next 3 months, we've got plans in place to increase the capacity in the service up to 90 in June and 100 in September. And we're in discussion with the ICB and other partners about increasing the cap in line with that, so that we're able to support partners in the region to reduce their waiting times, as well as to continue to bring ours down. So I think we're going to hand over to Shafi now to talk about the next section of the report.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chair. Shafi, Acting Medical Director. So I'm going to take the peer review actions from the Royal College of Surgeons and the Royal College of Radiologists. So pertaining to the RCS recommendations, we've had 21 recommendations within the report. 17 is now complete. 5 have been assured. And as you would have access to the Appendix 2, which details the individual recommendation. There are some dependencies that's slowing the progress pertaining to job planning, regional model, but we would expect that when that gets progressed, that we should be able to implement the recommendations in full. We're also sharing the output from the recommendations to the Royal College as part of the review. Pertaining to the Royal College of Radiologists report, as you're aware, that final report came out in March of 2026. One of the key priorities that needed immediate action was to ensure that we minimize unnecessary radiation to our patients who've had prior mammogram, and systems are in place now to ensure that we have access to the previous images to ensure that patients are not unnecessarily exposed to inappropriate radiation. Our new PAC system, our Philips system, is now in place, but further work needs to be done in terms of improving its technical ability and hence the working progress between the radiology service and our Chief Information Officer. So there's still work to be done on that front. With regards to the governance services pertaining to the radiologists, that's been embedded. There's lots of learning coming out of it, and also ensuring that the MDT is up to what it's meant to deliver. So there are 30 actions within that report. 9 have been fully implemented. 21 is in progress. We've taken the position that we would want to share where we are now with the Royal College of Radiology to give them some feedback as to where we are. So in the interest of being open and transparent with the progress that we've made, I'll hand over to Jill.
Thank you, Shafi. I'll touch upon the look back exercise, which continues, focusing on patients who received care from 2023 to 2025. We've onboarded 3 new reviewers, so that's giving us a total of 9 reviewers, 2 of whom have started and are starting to make a difference. Our latest sit rep is much more positive in terms of the work that they've done, and the 3rd one will start work next week. In terms of the numbers in the paper, 389 cases have been reviewed. and sadly 65 cases have met the threshold for duty of candour. 63 cases duty of candour has been discharged. In 2 cases we've been unable to reach patients but continue to try to do that. I think it's also worth noting that patients who phone the helpline are also triaged and either directed to a clinical setting to be reviewed and or join the review exercise, the look back exercise. And we've had 589 calls to the helpline in addition to the look back that we're also working through. We do see an increase if there is any media attention, and we've seen an increase in the last couple of weeks in terms of people who've rang that helpline. We are working up the paper currently to define the scope and scale of the look back, and that will be coming through our governance processes internally, and also working with our commissioners and NHS England who want to have input into that recommendation. The paper details a review of our governance around breasts because it's in place for about a year, so we want to review our effectiveness, and that will be brought back in our next report. Thank you.
Great, thanks Jill. Questions? Maggie and then Adam.
Thank you. My question is for Shafi. Thank you for that. I'm just concerned that out of the 30 actions of the report, 21 are in progress, and I just wondered what your timescale was in terms of getting them delivered.
Thank you, Maggie. Shafi, Acting Medical Director. So there are a few interdependencies pertaining to why there's delay in fully implementing the report. It largely surrounds the IT system and the further development that needs to take place to embed the opportunities that comes along with it. At this point, I can't give you exact timescales, but colleagues who are, really working on this will get an updated report that's coming to KEG on Thursday. So I hope that we should be able to bring something a bit more definitive in the next board.
Adam?
Thank you. So it's really positive to see the improvement in the clinical outcomes and the service processes, and we should, that's something we should absolutely take stock of as being a positive, notwithstanding all the work we have to do on the look back, but that's a positive aspect that we're in. How as a board are we assessing the confidence amongst patients, families, referrers? Matt, you know that our referral numbers are down, so therefore we've been able to work through our waiting list more effectively. As we increase the cap, confidence is going to be the most important thing from referrers and families. What are we doing? I don't know who I'm looking at for that question, so I'll...
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Matt Graham. So I think there's 2 things we have to be cognizant of in this. Firstly is being clear that we remember that while our outcomes are improving, we have to remember the harm that's been happened to women in the past, and we need to make sure in any communications that we make that we balance that against the improvements we're making. We're going to work with our GPs to look at how we can communicate to GPs what we're doing. So, because obviously they're effectively the gatekeepers for patients coming into the service. So I think key to work with the GPs and then think about how we put some public communications out, remembering the balance that we need to get in that communications.
Jill, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Alison. It's a really relevant question, Adam, and when we've engaged with patients around the look back exercise, there was quite a lot of feedback that people weren't cited on the improvements in the service. So we are looking to do some proactive work with current service users around patient experience to understand better their experience, and then how do we communicate that more broadly through our community groups and others. We've absolutely recognised it as something that we need to do, but as Matt says, being really cognizant of the past failures, but actually looking forward, how do we build that confidence in the service?
Thanks, Jill. Phil, did you have your hand up?
Hi, thank you. Phil Kane, non-exec. There's lots in the report, but just looking at 2 little things which are perhaps linked. A lot of businesses going elsewhere. If you were to look at it that way, a lot of patients are going to other trusts. Are we receiving any feedback from those other trusts about the impact it's having on the delivery of their services? Because there'll be large numbers. And then you see in the reports that for the Royal College of Surgeons about trying to bring business back in, bringing services back in with vacuum aspirated excision and biopsy. And it says there are plans to train staff, but do we have any timelines on those things? Because it's easy to say we're going to do that, but the question is, when are we going to do that? So it's about how do we provide the service for the local population, and how do we, I suppose it links in with Adam's question, how do we bring those folks home?
Matt?
If I take the first part of that, so Matt Graham, Chief Operating Officer. So yes, the change in the service and the change that we've had to make here at CDDFT have had a significant impact on other trusts in the region, particularly Gateshead and North Tees, who have much longer waits now than they would have done previously. In practice, what's happened is that we've lost a significant amount of capacity in the region from the service, because we've effectively gone back to the capacity we had within core NHS time, and lost the capacity that we had in the sort of LLPs and additional activity that we were doing. The work that we're doing with the Northern Cancer Alliance and the other trusts within the Alliance is to look at what the right level of that capacity is within each of the trusts, and then how do we bring that on stream over the next few months, and how do we bring the waiting times down across the piece. So I think while we're keen to bring the waiting times down within CDDFT as we increase capacity and start to attract referrals back into the trust, actually that will help other trusts potentially more than it helps us bring the weights down initially. And it'll only be as we get through that we start to see the weights come down across the whole of the system.
Second half, Shafi.
Thank you, Phil. So I think this is about bringing services back to our trusts. At the moment, we are obviously relying on other units to provide the vacuum-assisted biopsy, and this comes back to the recent MOU and the investment that we're going to have in personnel working within that service. So it will take some time to one, invest in increasing the number of staff providing the service, but also dedicated training that's required to deliver that. That would be something that we need to scope and work on, but at the moment I don't have any definite time for that. But one of the output from the MOE is really to invest in the team and build on it over time.
Okay, thank you all, Jill, Matt and Shafi. In relation to that, we'll bring a report back. We'll keep bringing a report back until we're happy that the best services return to what it should be. We're going to take a break. I'm conscious we're a bit behind time, so can we be back here and starting in 7 minutes, please, at 11:50? Thank you. Moving on, we're now going to look at our core assurance. We've changed the agenda this time, so we've put all of the AAAs together to give us an overview across all of our committees, and then follow that up with the Integrated Quality Performance and Workforce update to link into the various reports that we've had from the committees. So we're going to give this a try and see how it goes. In terms of the AAAs, for those that are presenting, we are a bit behind time. If we could take them as read and just draw out what you need to, that would be really helpful. We'll start with Adam in the Quality Committee.
Thank you, Adam Cramsey, Non-Exec Director and Chair of Quality Committee. So I've got 2 reports here for April and May. I'm just going to draw out 4 main points from the alerts. Steve touched on it in the Chief Exec update on plastic surgery, but this is an alert coming through the committee. We did note a lack of assurance just regarding the governance and the patient pathway, particularly given that 19 patients have been incorrectly categorised from a priority level, with 2 cases at that point confirmed as moderate harm. So we take some assurance that we have the external review happening, but given that we had no outcome of that at the time, it's an alert to the board. The next one is around our position on discharge letters. This has flowed through as an alert from the committee over 2 periods of committees. This is an issue we have whereby patients are being discharged and sent home without a discharge summary letter, either to the GP or to the patient. Some quite historic as well, We have not seen an improvement across those two committees. In fact, we saw worsening. In some areas we saw an improvement, but as a net position we saw worsening. Obviously that impacts on patient care as a result of continuity of care, particularly with GPs, and also just from a wider potential risk of patients coming back to the hospital or not getting the care they need. We did take some level of assurance at the last committee that there has been some movement, and Shafi provided us with information around the fact that no patient will be discharged without a discharge letter or within 24 hours. And there is a much greater degree of rigour around how that is being managed with regards to data and the care group directors being deeply involved. However, we are concerned because we've not seen an improvement. The next one is in relation to our mortality position across the trust. This has been a concern for quite some time, but has flowed through as an alert on 2 reports again around the fact that we have a worsening mortality position that is above what we should expect. And also we are not seeing the improvements in that. Again, some limited assurance taken that there are now some clear work streams spread across 3 of our executive directors, particularly one looking at our coding. Although we know that is an issue, we are not using that as the reason, and that's quite clear, because we know there is a reason that we have an excess number of deaths in the organisation beyond what we expect. I will link that to one piece of assurance in one of the committees, which is our external medical examiners have given us the assurance that less than 1% of the cases that have been reviewed have been deemed as being avoidable. So a very low level of avoidable deaths. However, we do have an excess mortality, and we need to see an improvement in that flow through the committee. The last one I will bring out is just around our use of temporary escalation spaces, or corridor care, as it's sometimes affectionately known. We have discussed that multiple times in the committee. We currently don't have a level of assurance that will take us off an alert around how we exit our over-reliance upon temporary escalation spaces. Not just the use of the space, but the experience of patients when they're in that space, the suitability of those patients being there, and the way in which we risk assess the patients and the space. This is a national issue. It's not just a CDDFT issue. However, we don't yet have the plans around how we improve our patient flow, and Matt, in his role now as Chief Operating Officer, will be bringing back a report to the next committee to give us a wider picture on how we reduce our dependency on temporary escalation spaces.
Great, thank you, Adam. Any questions for Adam on any of that? No, very clear, Adam. Thank you. Maggie, moving on.
Yeah. Thank you. Maggie Powell, NED and Chair of People and Culture Committee. I think it is fair to say that we had quite a challenging meeting at a People and Culture Committee. It was a bit brutal at times, to be honest, and I think there was a lot of stuff and a load of activity and a load of well-meaning things going on, but as a committee, most things were downgraded in effect to either little or no assurance, with a few notable exceptions. And I think that's really drawn a line in the sand and given us a good platform to work forward from. But it was not the most fun committee. I think Andrew would probably agree with that. Just in terms of the 2 absolute alerts that we committee felt we really needed to focus on. One, and I think this will be picked up from F&P as well, and probably has already been referred to today, workforce reduction plan. Whilst a very high level plan was presented, the committee just could not take really anything other than very limited assurance that there was any detail behind that plan, and certainly there was no obvious consideration given to risk assessment or quality of service, and in terms of mitigation of some potential reductions. That's not to say that consideration is not being given and had gone on, but we're not cited on it at the committee. So again, I've marked in red there, further detail was requested for the next meeting, and really quite specific detail, if not before the next meeting, certainly by then. The other item to really highlight in terms of alert was around sickness absence reduction, which sounds really easy, but actually, again, there was no confidence given that all of the activity that was going on was making a blind bit of difference, really. So whilst verbal reassurance was given, so clinical and non-clinical areas were on board with this and supportive of doing it, unsure whether it's a capability or a capacity issue as to why it's just not happening and not certainly producing any meaningful results. So again, ask for further detail at the next meeting. That's not to say that all the committee is doing is asking for more detail. It was really to put back to the executives to come up with actually how it's happening, or what's happening, and what support, if anything, is needed. I'll take everything under advise as read, unless anybody's got any questions on it. I did just want to point out two things under Assure, actually, because we were presented with a culture improvement plan. It's a very sensible plan. It wasn't all sparkly, and that needs to still follow in terms of actually enthusing people, but it was certainly a very sensible plan, and it was the first time we've seen that, and the next time we will have more meat on the bones of how that's going to actually work. And then there were some, the two items that actually came through from Jill around safe staffing and nursery validation. Actually, we took full assurance in both of those areas. Great reports, and I really give the committee confidence that that is in the right direction of travel.
Thank you, Maggie. Those two alerts, is there anything more you need board to do at the moment, or we've had the workforce reduction plan discussion already, I think, to an extent, and that's right across the executive team.
Yeah, I think it was not that the board needs to do anything, so we were querying as to whether they should go in alert, but ultimately for the executive around the room and for ourselves just to be aware that these were both on there last time. It wasn't my meeting last time, but they were both on there. They're still on there. So in terms of pace and direction of travel, it was really a concern. I'm not sure where we go to if at the next committee it's no better. I think that would be a very difficult conversation.
Sure, that's been noted around our executive colleagues. Anything else for Maggie on that? Adam?
Just a quick one, Maggie, and I think it's one that we need to look at, which is, in here around the maintaining high professional standards. And obviously we have a higher than average number of maintaining high professional standards. There's probably something we need to look at around the link with quality committee to make sure that we're getting the assurance in quality committee around any quality-based concerns that are surfacing as a result of that, to make sure there's nothing lost between the two.
Absolutely. You'll see in there was a need for a greater awareness of the plan. Lots more training has taken place, but one of the reports that we've asked to come back to is just to have some detail of the numbers and the themes. And yes, there needs to be a link.
Great. If there's no further questions, we'll take that for assurance. Thank you, Maggie. And we'll move on to Martin and finance and performance, please.
Thanks. Martin Knowles, Chair of Finance and Performance. So the report's there. Just on the alerts issue, so emergency care, we are below plan. 4 hours slightly below plan, but of more concern is 12-hour, where we seem to be quite a way out. The trajectory for the rest of the year was not where we want to be. We need to get certainly those 12-hour numbers down. We need to hit 82% by the end of the year. So Matt's kindly agreed to relook at that plan, bring it back to next committee, but in light of that, we have raised the risk rating to red. Steve's raised already our cost improvement programme to hit our financial targets for this year is a bit out. The team have done a great job in finding loads of savings, but there's loads more to find. So we really need that plan. As Rob said, we need that plan by next F&P so we can hit it by the end of the year. So thanks to the team for that, but we do need it. It's that pace thing. Talked about workforce reduction. In light of that financial plan, committee weren't assured about the workforce reduction plans would support our financial targets. So that's the alerts thing, Chair. The advice thing, two important things there. Again, Steve's raised this in his chief's report about reducing our RTT performance and our long waits. So we have some assurance about that, but committee will need to monitor progress quite closely, particularly around our long waits. So we still have over 700 patients waiting more than a year, which is really unacceptable. So Matt's kindly agreed again to look at that. Cancer waiting times, again, quite a way off, particularly around our 28 and 62 day waits. The focus, I think Matt advised us quite rightly, was to focus on 28 day. If we can get that right, then the 62 day, the treatment standard, should come down. So again, we'll have some assurance, particularly around the new consultant appointments, but again, committee will be closely monitoring this. Matt's agreed to have detailed plans for our next meeting. That's it, Chair. I'll just take questions.
Questions for Martin? No? Stunned us all into silence. Oh no, Maggie.
Sorry, I'm not actually sure if it's a question for Martin or if it's a question for Steve, but it's about in your advice section, and it's about workforce reduction. So obviously, the People Committee want the refined and detailed plan. You're wanting the refined and detailed plan. You meet before I do. So does that mean I just get your report, or are we looking at two separate things, and how are we going to make sure that that's joined up?
So if it's okay with your committee, Maggie, we'll need the plan by next F&P, just so we've got that plan in place, and that will subsequently obviously come to your committee, and I'm sure the board and exec team, but we've got to press quite hard on that, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. I'm just wanting to make sure that they can actually get it to you in time, because I was not assured that they could at our committee.
Yeah.
Liz.
Could I just add to that I would expect People Committee to have the view on tweaking, adjusting, improving, so it feels a bit the wrong way round. And I fully understand the pressures because of the financial consequences, but it feels out of order. So I wonder if there's a way of finance getting an in principle view, but People Committee holding the detail.
I think it may be a difference that you can say in words, but whether it actually comes out in practice, I think we just need to get on with it, Liz, is the thing. I think there may be something I was going to talk to Maggie about, potentially going back to a monthly meeting of some sort, because I think until we get over that, I was going to speak to you later today, but there we are. But subject to that discussion, are we happy to take that for assurance? And I'll pass over to Lisa to deal with the Audit Committee.
Thank you, Chair. Lisa Quinn, Non-Executive Director and Chair of the Audit Committee. So since the last board, we've had 3 audit committees, 2 in April and 1 in May. I'm going to focus on the May committee if I may, but again, happy to take any questions on the 2 April areas as well. 2 areas of alert. One was also present in the April meeting, first April meeting as well. And this is our potential outcome of the head of internal audit opinion. Due to where we are with internal audit report outcomes, it is expected that we would see a reduction in our overall assurance from internal audit. So just really wanting to highlight that to the board ahead of any confirmation from internal audit later this month or early next month. The second area is again an area that's been outstanding for some time in relation to continuity of care payments, which affects 55 staff. Rob gave a robust update to the committee on where we are now and taking actions forward, and we are now making progress since this report. I have asked that the committee has visibility of that going forward, but recognising this needs to be taken forward from an executive perspective now, just looking for a conclusion to come through to the audit committee. Some areas, one area of advice just really want to highlight, and this very much links, 2 areas. This very much links to what we're trying to do about ensuring we've got accountability and responsibility in the right place. So previously, actions from internal audit reports have all been centralised in terms of the response and communication with the rest of the organisation, which is out with a process that's in place across the rest of the customer base for Audit 1. So we agreed as a committee, the executives also agreed to implement, and we're moving to a position where we will be holding the actual owners of the actions accountable for those actions and reporting through to the committee on a timely manner. The other one I just want to raise from an advised point of view, and it's the link to Emma's patient story. We received the losses of compensation report, which highlighted a significant number of patient properties being lost, such as dentures and hearing aids. We didn't talk about this from a financial point of view, which is what it came to the committee for. We talked about this from a privacy and dignity point of view. And we're looking for the execs to come back to highlight what is going to happen around that to improve the experience of our patients with their belongings. A couple of things on Assure. In those two committees, we have agreed the audit plan for the year. We've also agreed a substantial review mid-year of the audit plan, recognising the change that we're going through throughout the year. We agreed the counter-fraud annual audit plan. We received the draft annual accounts on time, which is great. And we also received and approved the scheme of delegation, which again is another mechanism that is putting accountability and responsibility in the right place across the organisation. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Any questions on audit, Adam?
I'm loath to ask this question in case...
the can of worms.
No, because I'm the one that is wrong. Just referencing your point around overdue actions and accountability.
Yes.
Really positive to see that that's moving to individual ownership, because that's entirely where it should be. It's the role of the other committees in receiving an overall report for the audits that pertain to that committee with the overdue actions. And I'm not sure that we do have that on a regular basis. And I think I'd like to see that, because in other organisations I'm used to getting a report for, say, quality committee with all of the relevant audits for my area to then be able to do cross-referrals back to the audit committee where we're not seeing things move correctly.
Yeah. So we don't have that in place at the moment, but I definitely think that's something I can discuss with Warren and maybe look to do as an increase in visibility of that. Just really, if I can clarify, so what currently happens at the moment is everything comes into one central place, and then it's the organisation that it's chasing its own staff effectively. So we are trying to shift that, but the overall coordination of that still very much sits within the governance team. So I can't see any reason why we can't do that, and we'll look to see if we can do that and put it in place. Thank you.
Bob.
Yeah, just a couple of points. So the number of overdue audit actions was quite considerable up until very recently. We've actually got that down to single digits now. So a lot of work's gone into that, and a lot of responses have been received. So thank you to everyone who's sort of picked up that, and Warren's team in particular have done a good job in the last few weeks on that. In terms of the audit opinion from internal audit, my personal view on this is I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing that we've gone from good to reasonable, because it represents where we are as an organisation, bearing in mind that most of these reviews will reflect reviews that have happened over the last year. So I don't think any of us can really stand here and say that good would probably be an acceptable position. So I think reasonable is probably where we'd expect it to be.
Thank you, Rob. We'll take all of those AAAs for assurance and move to look at the integrated quality performance and workforce update. As colleagues know, there's been a lot of work to improve this document. Is still not there, and any feedback after the meeting would be really helpful, particularly in Kelly's direction. But I think we are getting better. We're getting better level of information that's understandable and helpful, particularly against the AAA reports. So who's going to lead this? Who's starting? Jill?
Thank you, Alison. So Jill Hunt, Chief Nurse and also the Director of Infection Prevention and Control. I'm going to touch on three subjects. I'm going to talk about infection prevention and control and where we are in terms of performance and actions, open incidents and complaints, and again where we are in terms of position and actions, and then the safe staffing metrics. So from an infection prevention and control perspective, as board remember, 25-26 has been a really challenging year where we breached nearly all of our thresholds that were set by NHS England. Significant amount of work with a refreshed action plan, which is drawing together clinical practice, cleaning and estates. We are seeing green shoots of improvement in terms of impact, and you can see the data for April. We don't have our trajectories for 26-27 yet, so we've reverted back to 25-26 upper thresholds. The methodology is unlikely to change, but sometimes we don't get the thresholds for a number of months. The areas where we had significant challenges around MRSA bacteremias, we haven't had an MRSA bacteremia since November 25. Clostridium difficile numbers are lower. There's no linked cases. There's no commonality. And we continue, either the medical director or myself, look at every case with the clinical team and are getting much better engagement. I think the things I'd probably like to pick out, strengthened governance around the whole of that agenda, increased training and education with frontline teams, working with frontline teams rather than virtually from experts, and really good relationships between SCL colleagues and clinical teams in terms of some of the cleaning and estates issues. We are seeing Shafi's working really hard on medical engagement. We've got named people to work on antimicrobial stewardship and really take ownership of that within the care groups. There is lots to do and it is continued focus, but we're definitely seeing green shoots. I should also note that we have no outbreaks of CPE, and the CPE specific work is coming into our overarching healthcare associated infection reduction group, which is also attended by commissioners and UK HSA. We are part of work with the ICB, with 2 other trusts in the region, and have had some external visits. We have a learning event on the 10th of June, and that's really focusing on some of the behavioural aspects of infection prevention and control practices and perhaps different approaches we need to consider. So we'll bring that work back through Infection Control Committee, Quality Committee and Board when we have that to share. The report focuses on our incidents and complaints, really from a backlog perspective, which we touched upon in the CQC improvement plan. And as I say, we have agreed trajectories with the care groups who have the biggest challenges to work through, and there is progress being made. I would like to highlight to board the proactive patient experience work. As board are aware, we piloted the real-time feedback on 3 wards. That's being significantly upscaled in June. So we'll be getting much better patient feedback in real time. It's been really well received. We're going to link the feedback through to our excellence reports because there's lots of positives. But what we're also seeing is lots of local ownership. An example, one of the wards on the Durham site, there was a theme around noise at night. The ward manager's doing spot checks. She's dipping into the ward at 2 a.m. to see what's going on. So we're seeing that sort of local ownership, which is what that programme is absolutely put in place to see. And we should see, and other organisations that have done it well have seen significant reductions in formal complaints because things are resolved. So we're really excited about that. We have this week launched extended visiting on all of our sites to allow patients greater time with their relatives, and also to make sure that relatives have access to healthcare professionals for better communication, and our wards have rolled out what they're calling a Sisters Hour, where senior clinical leaders are available to speak to relatives who might want some extra information. The third element of the paper talks about safe staffing and provides assurance for the month of April that our staffing levels were safe. Healthcare support worker continues to be an area of focus for us. We've got monthly centralised recruitment. We've got a refreshed training programme for all new colleagues to the organisation, and are really focusing on retention. Our turnover is too high in that group, and we really want to make sure people stay with us and have a career pathway with us. We have recruited registered nurses who have trained with us, who are due to qualify in September. We have switched off healthcare support worker agency from the end of April. We're monitoring that closely. It's heavily linked into our delivery of enhanced therapeutic observations of care, and there's some really good work happening there. Rostering oversight is working well, with monthly meetings with all owners of rosters, check and challenge, and to improve the consistency of rostering. And we have established a nursing midwifery AHP workforce group to feed into the strategic workforce group. So I'll pause there. Thank you.
Any questions for Jill on that? Do you want to add anything on performance? You've already talked in terms of the integrated improvement plan, quite a bit about performance there.
Yes, so Matt Graham, Chief Operating Officer. Yes, I don't really want to repeat the numbers that Martin's already talked about. I think what I would like to say is, I don't think what the report describes at the moment is enough around what we're doing to address some of those issues, and that's something I want to develop in terms of how we report back to board next time. Since I've started in the last 2 weeks, I've been working really closely with the care groups and my ops team to work through what are our priorities in each of these areas that will really make a difference to performance. We had a really good report from a company called the PSC on urgent emergency care, which we discussed with the care groups this morning. They have identified very similar issues to what we already know about, but also some of the underlying causes for us. And through the performance delivery group that we talked about in the governance section, we'll be developing a plan for how we start to address those. So three things in particular. Streaming away from ED at the front door. We don't use our UTC and our SDEC and things as well as we could do, which means more patients come through ED. There are some issues with processes within ED, and then, as we all know, the issues around discharges. We've concentrated a lot on earlier discharges, but I think we just need to be also looking at discharges in their entirety as well as when they happen. Similarly, from an RTT perspective, as Martin said, I think we have a plan in place which, if we deliver the plan in terms of activity, will enable us to get to the target we've set for RTT. Really good progress in terms of theatre productivity, and we're seeing over-delivery in terms of theatre cases. We're not quite where we need to be on outpatient productivity and outpatient utilisation yet. So we're looking really closely at how we increase the number of slots within outpatients. We've done one step of that, there's further to go. But also, even within that, we're not then using all of those slots fully. So there's work to do on how we make sure that we're fully booking and getting as many patients through the clinics we've got in place as we possibly can. I think those two things, plus some training for our general managers around RTT processes, which we're looking to put in with NHS England, will really help improve RTT. And then on cancer, essentially, as Martin said, we're pretty good at the back end of the pathway once patients have been diagnosed. It's the front end of getting through to that diagnosis quickly that's where our issue is. And effectively, we need to concentrate on 3 major tumour groups, skin, breast and colorectal. And we've got a detailed recovery plan, which we're just finalising at the moment, which will come back to Finance and Performance Committee and also go to NHS and the ICB, particularly focused on those 3 areas.
Any questions from Matt? Martin?
Just a quick one, and thanks for Matt's work on this, by the way. 2 weeks probably seems quite a long time, does it? Yeah. But the important thing is discharge, and I know Adam's committee and Adam himself is all over this and fully understands it. But of course, discharge letters need to be issued before discharge, but we also need to maintain flow. So we need those discharges in the morning to maintain that flow. So it's that triangulation, Chair.
Phil and Adam.
Phil Kane, non-exec. Table 4 is interesting because when you look at the spread across the tumour pathways, the one that sticks out like a sore thumb is lung. And that really worries me, to have 7 patients who are at day 100 plus, knowing the way that lung tumours behave. So I'm just wondering 2 things. Why does that one stand out like that? Because it's a relatively low volume tumour pathway compared to some of the others. And are we doing harms reviews on the patients who are 104 day plus? Because if not, we probably should.
Yes. So first point on your last point, Phil, is that yes, we are doing harm reviews on all those patients. Second, the initial part is part of that pathway isn't in our control. So a lot of the patients for lung go to both the RVI and James Cook. So we need to work with them more closely on making sure that those patients get through both our part of the pathway and theirs. But we'll look into those particular patients for you.
Could you look it up at GI as well, because those tumours behave like that too?
Adam?
Not a question, a comment that just bears repeating. I think it's one we've discussed already, but it's certainly in the 7 months that I've been here, we've had multiple diagnoses of the problem across all the things we've talked about. What we've not seen is that translate into actual action. And you said it yourself, but it's just to accentuate the point that we have to see the action and stop just diagnosing the problem and start delivering the change that's needed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think Steve talked earlier in the board about there has been, and probably still is, a bit of a culture of describing the problem and why things are the way they are. Part of our job as execs is to move the culture from that to a culture where we're less worried about why it is where it is and more worried about what we're going to do to make it better.
That's Matt's job for week 3. Any other questions? I'm conscious that both Shafi and Andrew are also down as delivering something on this topic. I don't know if there's anything you want to say in addition to what we've heard elsewhere in the meeting. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Andrew Thacker, Director of Workforce and OD. Just to quickly reflect on the workforce metrics, overall training and turnover are within range. There are some specific training shortfalls, and I think we've talked about some of those when we discussed CQC action plans a little bit earlier. Sickness rate is the one that we need to focus our efforts on, and I won't repeat any of the conversation that we've already had through People and Culture Committee. But what I will just add is that there is a whole heap of work that's gone on in the background to refine some of the metrics that are now being monitored through the performance meetings. So hopefully we will be able to provide some of the assurance that Maggie talked about a little bit earlier in terms of those sickness action plans when we start to see some movement on some of the metrics there.
Anything further for Andrew? No. Thank you. Okay, we'll take that, I think, for partial assurance, our performance report. And again, if there's comments in terms of its format, if we can feed those back in, that would be really helpful. Moving on to medical and nursing updates, and welcome Kim Williams, our Director of Midwifery. I'll hand over to Jill first to introduce the item, and then over to Kim.
Thanks, Alison. There's a lot of papers in the pack. I think I'll just hand straight directly over to Kim to pick out the key issues for us.
Thank you, Jill. Thanks, Chair. So what you've received today is the Director of Midwifery report and the Maternity Incentive Scheme required appendices that are to be received by Board. The remaining appendices for the Maternity Incentive Scheme are received at Quality Committee, which is the delegated subcommittee to Board. So I want to receive this report today and agree the minutes, the wording for the minutes in section 6. So I'll just draw out the high-level detail that is required for your attention today. From the alert section was the Embrace mortality data from 2024 that we discussed at length at board meeting last month or the month before. We have completed the terms of reference for that, and we've managed to secure somebody in the region who will undertake an external review of our mortality from 2023 and 2024. So that is in train. So that's really good news from that regard, that we'll have external scrutiny. Just to note, maternal and neonatal readmissions, the annual rates for maternal readmissions have actually doubled from the previous year, and we've seen an increase percentage of neonatal admissions. We do quarterly reports looking at these metrics, and I am bringing it to your attention to board to note that we're pulling the reports, we're reviewing each of the data, looking at the themes and trends and disseminating any learning, but it is the equivalent of what's happened nationally with early discharges from maternity units where families are requesting to go home early. So we're looking at uncontrolled hypertensive disorders in mothers and feeding problems with neonates. So we're not outlining in terms of what's happened nationally from there. Induction of labour, we've seen a 5% increase. From an annual perspective, that's in keeping with national guidance. We're required to induce families with gestational hypertension, hypertensive disorders, gestational diabetes, and according to the Saving Babies Lives Care bundle that we've implemented. Again, that's to reduce stillbirths, neonatal deaths and hypoxic brain injuries in keeping with the national ambition. So again, the important element there is that we have noted it. We are doing deep dives into each of the pathways of care and looking at our outcomes to make sure we're having positive outcomes and we've not got too many delays for induction of labour. Postpartum hemorrhages over 1,500 mils, I've also bringing to your attention, which I have done for the majority of the meetings that I've been attending, to note that we are an outlier. I think the important element is that we know we're an outlier and the work that we're doing to try to bring down the rates. But we've been flagged by the National Maternity Perinatal Audit from 2024. So that's England, Scotland and Wales, looking at metrics and KPIs for maternity services. And we were an outlier for our postpartum hemorrhages over 1,500. I think the positive note here is that we already knew this, and that's important that it make our governance systems internally are working. The work that we've already done around this metric, I've presented to Quality Committee and through our governance processes to pull the themes and trends and the learning around that. We've seen an increase in caesarean section rates, and that is consistent with our postpartum hemorrhage rates, because you will see bigger postpartum hemorrhages in operative births. And some of the learning that we've pulled out of that we've already disseminated. Our APGAR score at less than 7 at 5 minutes, we were an outlier for that from 2024. Again, I was already aware of this, pulled the learning from this and started some immediate quality improvements within that metric. We've performed deep dives and thematic analysis on both APGARs and postpartum hemorrhages following the alert from NMPA, and they will be presented to Quality Committee. I've done a response to NMPA, which I've provided to Jill Hunt and Shafi to review to return back to NMPA. By the time this report was published, we hadn't received a MOS signal. However, just hot off the press on the 1st of June, we've received a maternity outcome signal system MOS alert within the department. Now, MOS is a potential safety issue. It could indicate a safety issue within maternity services. It was born from the East Kent report. Again, that's monitoring systems and processes so that it alerts us to a potential issue so that we proactively act and measure that chosen outcome immediately. Now, it was a level 1 signal, which is a 95% confidence interval around a potential safety issue within a maternity service looking at intrapartum care. We received it on the 1st of June. I proactively pulled together an MDT review to look at the 2 incidents that this related to. So that was a neonatal death and a stillbirth. One, though it was unavoidable, one incident. The other, we have pulled immediate learning from that system, proactively managed that learning, and I've provided a response with the MDT that's sitting with, again, with Jill and Shafi, to sign off and return back to the region and nationally to look at that signal. So that's an important element that I need to bring to your attention. Just from an assurance perspective, we are sitting as a 27, which is green, which is a good system within the regional heat map as well. Year 8 for the incentive scheme is with us again. You know that we achieved year 7 and we are looking at the safety actions around year 8 for the maternity incentive scheme. You've received for your review PMRT, quarter 3 and quarter 4 reports and board reports. So I'll ask if there are any questions around that when I finish this element today. You've received the perinatal quality surveillance report with the minimum data set. So that looks at our stillbirths, neonatal deaths, any cases that have gone to the maternity neonatal safety investigation branch, our moderate harms, and looking at our safe care in terms of staffing, acuity and one-to-one care. Positive metrics are that our acuity at Darlington and Durham are 93 and 94%, which is above the 85% required metric. So that's a huge improvement in staffing. One-to-one care supernumerary status is 100%. Category 1 and 2 delays for caesarean sections remain on there as an outlier. We do report on both of those. Any outline metrics go through our governance processes, and we do report and review each to make sure there are no poor outcomes as a result, and there's improvement work around both those metrics. The Maternity Transformation Programme has a process and governance wrapped around it, so you'll know that we have local, regional and national reports sitting in one place for maternity services. It's taken 12 months to get on top of all of those different actions. You'll know for maternity there are hundreds of actions and requirements nationally for us to provide evidence and assurance and bed to keep safety within maternity services. We are due to receive the Nottingham-Ockenden report on the 24th of June. I will be including that within the transformation programme and putting the required evidence assurance around that. But just to note as well for board today, now that we have that maternity transformation programme up and running, we are now starting to separate them down into 4 work streams with leads around the work streams, and they will meet fortnightly. And then there'll be a monthly transformation programme meeting where there'll be external scrutiny from our MIA and our regional colleagues and our non-executive director, so that we're not marking our own homework and we're not looking at our own evidence and assurance and saying that that's okay. We will be taking the report through the transformation programme and seeking ratification at that meeting. So that's a really good governance process that we start, and the first meeting's due in August. And then finally, I present to you the triangulation of the litigation scorecard. So that is looking at themes, trends, complaints, term admissions, PSIIs, CQC regulations and feedback from our service users. And then what we do is we look at the 10 years of litigation claims, we triangulate to make sure that the same themes and trends are not coming through the service. And then we look to see what kind of improvements we've got in place and what learning we've identified and how we disseminate that learning amongst our teams. Within that, we have areas looking at our culture, which is a huge area for improvement, particularly pertinent across both of our sites. I bring a culture improvement plan that I'm leading on at the moment that will start to come through the Director of Midwifery report to look at the improvements and how we change culture within our service, and also our inequalities, looking at families from different backgrounds in terms of deprivation and ethnicity. I now require from our inequalities matron a quarterly report and an annual report. We've just received the annual report looking at our incidents and themes and looking at inequalities around that to make sure there's not over-representation and look at wider determinants of health. So in looking at ethnicity, there was no clear evidence of disproportion in our incidents within maternity service. However, there was greater deprivation, which accounted for substantial proportion of our incidents, and that was relating to safeguarding, late access to maternity care, communication barriers, mental health and continuity. Just to note today for boards of directors that we know they are overrepresented in terms of our incidents and themes, but we're making really good progress on inequalities and closing the gap on wider determinants of health within our service. So that's all I want to present today. Please receive my update. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for a very comprehensive update, Kim. Jill?
Yeah, thanks, Alison, and thanks, Kim. I think it's probably worth noting that our systems and processes currently are robust enough that we're aware of things before people tell us. I think we are dealing with a number of historic alerts that are often a year, 18 months down the line. So we're doing a look back whilst we're focusing on current safety. I mean, the MOS system is doing its job, but it isn't something that Kim and colleagues weren't aware of and all over. So I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jill. Adam.
Thanks. Kim, I look forward to in Quality Committee and going in detail all the things you mentioned there on postpartum hemorrhage and C-section readmissions to get those deep dives as we've asked for. My question is in relation to what's in your report, but not specifically to maternity, which is around the System C Badgernet issue that we're facing into, which is obviously a national issue around the prescribing of aspirin prophylaxis for people with a BMI greater than 35. I take assurance from what's in the report around how we've done the risk assessment of the individuals who should have been flagged by the system.
Yeah.
My question broadens wider than that from a trust perspective around how we are managing and understanding our clinical risk assessment tools and decision tools within the trust. Because obviously Badgernet is and the System C has been used as a clinical decision tool in this instance because it is flagging whether someone should be prescribed aspirin for prophylaxis. How do we have a grip across the entire trust of systems that are clinical decision tools that are driving clinicians to make decisions or not? Because this has clearly highlighted an area where potentially we had a reliance on something that people should have also been thinking alongside that. Should we be risk assessing? And it gives me concern around the grip we have. So not maternity, you're Prieston.
Steve?
So I think it's a really important point, and it's important to broaden it out because we do have a large number of clinical systems. So I think the straightforward answer, Adam, is we probably don't know, and we need to go away and do that piece of work on risk assessment. There's obviously much more structured governance around tools that are classed as medical devices. I don't think this would be classed as a medical device, it's decision support. Really important, helpful challenge point. I think we need to go away, have a bit of a think about how we assess that, and then bring that back through Quality Committee.
Maggie.
Thank you, Maggie Davlo, Non-Executive Director. Loads and loads of information, great, good quality information there, and I've got a tiny little thing because I just see it as a bit of an opportunity, which we don't often get here, to just fix a little thing, and we might not be able to fix it, but you referred it, it's still under your alert right at the bottom about the fact that there's no maternity bereavement suite in some of our locations. It feels as though that's something that we could just fix. Not easily, not brilliantly, but I just wondered if we could just commit to doing something about that.
Yeah, Kim and I are looking at each other. So we agree. There are two key facility changes that we want to make, the bereavement suite being one of them. There's been some feasibility work that's being done. So there is a design and a plan about where that could be introduced. The issue the issue we're grappling with is how we fit it into the capital programme, but the team have been in discussion with a charity who supported the bereavement suite at Durham, and so we're exploring with them what the opportunity for that might be. But we absolutely agree, Maggie, it needs to be sorted as soon as practically possible.
Phil.
Thanks, Chair, for just one thing in Table 7.
Beg your pardon. Sorry, Philip Kane, non-exec. Just two small items of detail in table 7 of one of the papers. It has a name in it, and I think the name should be redacted.
Look at that, thanks, Phil. Anything else for Kim? Thank you very much, Kim. Lovely to see you as always. Shafi, Learning from Deaths.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm here to present the Learning from Death dashboard and the mortality status with the Trust. And I know we've covered it quite a bit in our quality committee report from Adam. So with regards to the dashboard, we undertook 454 mortality review. That makes up about a fifth of the deaths that occurred in our Trust for the 25-26 period. And it was less than 1%. 2 cases was deemed avoidable. And there was over 70% of cases that showed good and excellent care that was provided. But obviously the key part is really triangulating the data that we acquired from the mortality review. So what Adam touched upon earlier on about we are diagnosing issues, the thing is about what we're doing about it. So in my one of the slides that I've attached, that what are we going to do in terms of the data that we've acquired, how are we triangulating that with, for example, our ME services and also the mortality reviews that's occurring at specialty level. So there's a piece of work that we're doing, that we're bringing all that together, because we are data rich, but I don't think we are taking full advantage of the information that we have, because we do need to target clinical areas that we think that is probably causing problems with our SHME findings. Yes, there's a lot of talk about the technical aspect of why our SHME indicator is high and we are an outlier in the region. There is no doubt that, parallel to this, we think that there's a potential underlying clinical risk, and hence, there's continued focus on addressing the clinical element of that could be contributing to a high SHME score. Whilst that's happening, there's also a lot of work underway that's been alluded earlier. There are 3 work streams, and there's some definite clear timelines that we've agreed upon, and I would hope to see that will have an impact in the coming months. But the SHME data in itself, in terms of the annual feed, will come much later, but we do get feeds every month to see if there's any improvement over time. Ultimately, it's about triangulation of the data, and that's the bit that we're working hard on to ensure that the clinical elements of the services are, we're not losing sight of that. I'll stop there.
In my understanding from the AAA is that the SHME is coming back to your committee, Adam, is that right?
We have it now as a monthly standing agenda item.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think there's generally a lack of assurance around that subject. But I think rather than put it as an action for us as a board, I think it goes through your committee. If you're still concerned, bring it up to us.
We will manage it through and just escalate to the AAA as necessary if needed.
Martin.
Martin Knowles, non-exec. So we talked about coding, Shafi, at Finance and Performance Committee and probably at Quality Committee. Have you got any views about our coding at the moment? I mean, I understand there's concerns, but I'm just kind of looking for your perspective on that.
So Martin, I think coding is one of the technical aspects. I think in terms of how we manage, or put it simply, when a patient comes through the door, when we clock the patient, where do we populate their comorbidities is key. Mm-hmm. Because coding becomes meaningless if you're not populating the data in the right place. So there's a work stream that's looking at the workflow for that, so that there's only one way of doing it. So we're populating the comorbidities in the right place, so that when we do have, put the resources in coding the non-elective pathway, we're pulling the appropriate data to make sense of what's going on. So there are several moving parts. In terms of investment in the coding resources, but what we need to really address is the finished consultant episode. We've got very high finished consultant episode, and again, we've just had a meeting recently, and we think we should be able to solve that problem in the coming weeks by looking at a different way of identifying finished consultant episodes as they come through the non-elective pathway. This is a specific problem in the non-elective pathway.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Anything else for Shafi? No. Thank you, Shafi. We'll take that for the partial assurance, but assurance. Moving on to the finance report, Rob.
Yeah, it's month one, so not a huge amount to report. I'll take the report as read and just pick up 1 or 2 points. Effectively, we have done better than planned in month one. That's probably reflective of the fact that we've profiled the plan to be less onerous in the first quarter, as we were aware that we still had quite a way to go in developing the CIP programme, but it's an improvement nonetheless, so we'll take it. Especially because we've just had regional results and we're one of the few in the region who've actually met plan in month one, so we'll take it. A lot of that is around some improvements to agency spend, and underlying we'd have been almost on plan for bank. The main reason we're over on bank is because of industrial action. And nationally, NHC have decided not to fund any of the industrial action in month one. So all trusts are expected to take in or deal with themselves the costs of industrial action in month one. And whether that will continue, we don't know. I was on a call yesterday with the Secretary of State and Jim, who said they would leave that under review. So we will have to take on board that sort of £400,000 additional cost from industrial action. In terms of savings, they are, as I say, profiled to a very slow start. We did manage to achieve that, but that was largely through non-recurrent measures, so sort of run rate changes and some offsetting of reserves that were deemed to not be needed. So that reiterates the position that we raised in the FPC AAA report, that we do need to get that the rest of the savings identified and de-risked as quickly as possible. Capital expenditure was slightly behind on. This is largely due to delays from NHS England in determining the schemes that they're going to move forward on the return to constitutional standards. Still no sight of an agreed release of that. We've had some releases against some of that. So for good news in terms of some of our breast ultrasound machinery that we want to purchase, so we're going to proceed at risk. We haven't had the MOU yet, but we're going to proceed at risk on a couple of those cases, probably due to the underspend. The other one is around bed storage as well. So we're not going to leave that underspend underutilised, and we hope to catch up as soon as possible.
Great. So we've already had the discussion about savings and coming back to F&P. Anything else for Rob? No, thank you, Rob. We'll take that for assurance. Workforce and OD, I don't think we have anything in particular this month. Freedom to speak up. Mel had hoped to be here, but she's not well. So I think we've got a report from Mel. We did talk about it in some detail at Council of Governors, which was helpful in terms of board oversight and visibility of it. In Steve's report, we talked about the changes at NGO. I don't know if anyone has any questions around that particular thing that Steve could deal with, but otherwise, I think we'll just have to accept that the report is here. We've seen it, and Mel will come back in due course with a further report. People happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Corporate business, board assurance, key risks, please.
Thanks, Chair. Warren Edge, Senior Associate Director of Assurance and Compliance. So the board assurance framework focuses on 6 objectives that the board has, strategic objectives that the board has reserved to itself around clinical and financial sustainability, quality, culture leadership and teamwork, access, developing services to look after people at home before hospital, and digital systems. The framework is actually underpinned by subsidiary frameworks in each committee that look after, in total, 13 core business objectives. So the update to the BAF, which is here today for the second time in its current form, has worked its way through the relevant executives, the executive groups, and up through and discussed within the relevant committees for their particular parts of it. For each of the 6 objectives, it sets out essentially the improvement and transformation plans in summary form and the assurance position in relation to those. It then provides the committee's views on the assurance position and the action for those objectives within their remit that link to each of the 6, and any related risks over tolerance. I think someone used the phrase earlier in the meeting, bearing in mind this is the second time we've had the BAF in this format, and the second time we've looked where we are against the strategic objectives, that we're climbing the foothills. And because we're climbing the foothills, we haven't moved out of the red into the amber for 5 out of the 6 objectives. The home before hospital objective is rated amber at this stage. I would suggest that all of the objectives are consistent with what's come up from the committees. Give the board assurance that the committees have been proactive in challenging the objectives within a remit. So for the quality committee requested that there wasn't a downgrading of the risk score on patient experience, because we need to do a lot more to actually pull through the patient voice consistently within the trust. And the Finance and Performance Committee, as you've heard, requested that the risk score in relation to unplanned care was increased from 12 in amber to take it into the red. There was a request from the board last time for definitions of indicators, key measures, that would give us an objective view as to when we would move from red to amber and amber to green. That work is taking place. The People and Culture Committee has seen and is content with the proposals around what would line up with the culture and teamwork objective here. The executive groups underneath Quality Committee have seen theirs. It will come to Quality Committee at the next meeting for the committee's view. And Finance and Performance Committee's had one go at it. There's some further exec discussion needed around those. So when it comes back next time, it will have those indicators defined. And I'll stop there, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Adam.
Thanks, Warren. It's really encouraging to see the maturing position on the use of the board assurance framework and how it's interplaying through committees. One request I've got is it's in relation to the appendix around the summary of risks over tolerance for the corporate risk register. Really useful to see the inclusion of that. What would be good for us to have a good, robust discussion is the trend over time of that, because this is just a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
I would like us to be able to challenge where something hasn't moved for 9 months, particularly if it's a 16 or a 20, because that's where we need to be putting our maximum effort and making our agendas be shaped around those things. Currently, it's just a snapshot.
Yeah, no, I completely accept that, Adam. The relevant corporate risks will start going to the committees as well. So in the way that we're reporting to committees, we'll include a trend indicator so you can see that movement over time. And if it is movement, or you'll be able to detect where things have got stuck.
Great, thanks, Adam. Hayley.
Thank you. So outside finance, the BAF is one of my favourite things. So this is not a question, more an offer. It's very sad, I do apologise. So it's not a question, it's more an offer, because I think the one thing I've noticed that I can't see, and I don't know whether you guys do it, is rating of your assurance. Because you can have ratings for your risk, which will always lead to a high level of risk, because there's risk you cannot manage out because it's systemic. But the flip side to that coin is that you can also have good assurance with a high risk level. And I think it's seeing that dynamic between the two can really help then to shape the agendas and focus your attention on what you should be managing and what you should be aware of, but sitting within your risk tolerance as a board. So very happy, just if you'd like to have a discussion on that and see whether we can do any compare and contrast across organisations.
Yeah, happy to have that discussion, Hayley. We do some of that at the committee level. It's not reflected in here. And we're perhaps not doing it in line with best practice. It'd be good to look at that in terms of committee level.
Thanks, Hayley. Anything else? Is there anything we've discussed today that would make you query our ratings in here? No.
I think it's quite reassuring to see that the discussions, which can go in many directions, have actually already been captured as recognised risks or mitigation. So I think it's important and reassuring.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, well, she'll take that for assurance. Register of sealing.
Yes, it's a very, very quick one. This rounds off the last year, just in terms of my accountability to report to the board where the seal has been used. It's been used, as you'll see, on 3 contractual documents in line with the scheme of delegation. We've written it into the scheme of delegation that reporting would be 6 months rather than quarterly to the board in future. So as long as the board doesn't object to that, we'll enact that change going forward.
Happy with that? Yeah. More than happy with that. Great. Excellent. Great. Well, that brings us towards the end. I'm just a minute over at the minute. We do like to have a bit of a meeting review as to how the meeting went. Perhaps what we thought of the way in which we presented the papers, etc. I'm very conscious that I'm now impinging on your lunchtime. So if there's any burning comments now, then let me have them. If not, we can discuss over lunch. It's looking like lunch is won. Great. Thank you all. Thank you for those who have joined us today from members of the public in our room, and also for those who are watching us on a screen, either live or at some later stage. Thank you for your interest in our organisation. So that brings us to an end. Are we happy to start again at 1:30? Is that enough of a break? Yeah. Great. See you then.